The bank manager whispered into the phone, his voice trembling so hard I could almost hear his heartbeat through the receiver. "Mr. Thorne, please do not react. Just listen. Your wife is standing at teller window 4 right now. She is holding the hand of a man who looks exactly like you. He is wearing your gray suit. He is wearing your Patek Philippe watch. And he is currently signing your name on a withdrawal slip for $500,000 in cash." I replied, my voice dead calm. "That is impossible, Henderson. My wife is in Miami for a charity gala, and I am standing on the roof of a warehouse on the south side of Chicago." Henderson lowered his voice even further. "Then you need to get down here immediately, Isaiah, and for God's sake, do not use the front door. My name is Isaiah Thorne. I am 72 years old. To the neighbors in my quiet suburban cul-de-sac, I am just a retired old man who drives a rusted Ford F-150 and spends too much time fishing. They see the gray beard, the slight limp in my left leg, and the calluses on my hands, and they think I am harmless. They think I am past my prime. They have no idea that I own half the commercial real estate they drive past every morning. I built my empire in the 70s and 80s, brick by brick, fighting tooth and nail for every square inch of land in a city that did not want a black man to own anything. I learned early that silence is power. I learned that if you flash your money, you become a target, so I hid it. I buried it in trust, in shell companies, in offshore accounts. I played the part of the humble retiree perfectly, but apparently I did not play it well enough to fool the woman sleeping in my bed. I was standing on the roof of an old textile factory I had bought 3 days ago. The wind was whipping off Lake Michigan, cutting through my jacket, but I did not feel the cold. I only felt the heat rising in my chest. Beatrice, my beautiful, elegant, devoted wife of 15 years. She had kissed me on the cheek this morning at 5 a.m. She had complained about the early flight to Miami. She had packed her Louis Vuitton suitcase with the evening gowns I bought her. She had looked me in the eye and said, "I will miss you, Isaiah. Don't work too hard." And now Henderson was telling me she was 3 miles away, robbing me blind with a doppelganger. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. I did not run. Running is for people who are scared. I walked to the edge of the roof, climbed down the scaffolding with the precision of a man half my age, got into my truck. The engine roared to life with a cough black smoke. I merged onto the expressway, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned the color of ash. $500,000. That was the limit for an emergency cash withdrawal from my private vault. It was a failsafe I had set up years ago in case the market crashed or the world ended. It required a physical key, a retinal scan, and a signature. Beatrice did not have the key. Beatrice did not have my eyes, which meant this was not just a robbery. This was a coup. I wove through the midday traffic, my mind racing faster than the truck. How did they get the key? I kept it in a safe behind the wall of my study. Only I knew the combination. Unless she had been watching me. Unless she had installed cameras in my own home. The thought made my stomach turn. I had let a viper into my bed, warmed it, fed it, and now it was sinking its fangs into my neck. I pulled into the alley behind the First National Bank. It was a fortress of glass and steel in the financial district, a place where money moved in silence. Henderson was waiting for me by the reinforced steel door used for armored truck. He looked pale. He was a good man, one of the few white men in this city I trusted with my life. He had managed my accounts for 20 years. He knew the real Isaiah Thorne, not the old man the world saw. He opened the door and ushered me in, scanning the perimeter as if he expected snipers. "They are still in the private client lounge," Henderson hissed, leading me down a sterile white corridor. I told them there was a delay with the vault timer. I bought us 10 minutes, no more. "Show me," I said. We entered the security control room. It was a dark cave illuminated by dozens of glowing monitors. The head of security, a man named Mike, nodded at me grimly and pointed to the large central screen. I stopped breathing. On the screen, in high-definition color, sat my wife, Beatrice. She looked stunning in a cream-colored business suit, her legs crossed, sipping an espresso with the casual elegance of a queen. She did not look nervous. She did not look like a woman committing a felony. She looked bored, but it was the man next to her that made my blood freeze in my veins. He was sitting in my favorite posture, leaning back slightly, one hand resting on his knee. He was wearing my charcoal gray bespoke suit, the one I had tailored in London 5 years ago. It fit him perfectly. He had my silver hair, trimmed exactly the way my barber does it every Tuesday. He had my beard. He even had the small, jagged scar above his right eyebrow, a souvenir from a construction site accident in 1985. "My God," I whispered. "It gets worse," Henderson said, typing a command on the keyboard. "Look at this." He rewound the footage to when they walked in. The man walked with a limp, my limp. He favored his left leg, dragging it just slightly, exactly the way I did when the weather was damp. It was a specific, painful rhythm that I had lived with for decades. It was not something you could mimic by watching a video. You had to study it. You had to practice it for months. "He passed the visual ID check," Henderson said. "The teller didn't even blink. He knew your social security number. He knew your mother's maiden name. He knew the name of your first dog. He answered the security questions faster than you do." I watched the screen. The imposter leaned over and whispered something to Beatrice. She laughed. She reached out and stroked his hand. It was a gesture of intimacy, of familiarity. She touched him the way she used to touch me. She fixed his collar. She smiled at him with a warmth that I realized, with a sickening jolt, she had not shown me in years. "The retinal scan?" I asked, my voice sounding like gravel. "We haven't done it," Henderson said. "That's the final step before we open the box. That's why I called you. I knew he wouldn't pass. But Isaiah, if he fails the scan, the silent alarm trips. The police come. And if the police come, this becomes public record. I stared at the man on the screen. He wasn't just wearing my clothes, he was wearing my life. This was why Beatrice had been so insistent on my schedule lately. This was why she asked so many questions about my old injury. She wasn't caring. She was building a dossier. She was training a replacement. Open the door, I said. Henderson looked at me like I was insane. Isaiah, no. If you walk in there, it's a confrontation. He's dangerous. Anyone willing to go to these lengths is desperate. I said, open the door to the observation room. I corrected him. I want to see them with my own eyes, through the glass. Henderson nodded and led me to the adjacent room. It was separated from the client lounge by a large one-way mirror. I stood there in the dark, inches away from the people destroying my life. I could hear them through the speakers. Honey, are you sure this is going to be enough? The imposter asked. His voice, it was terrifying. It was deep, raspy, with the same cadence as mine. He had the same South Side drawl buried under a layer of polished business speak. It's just the first withdrawal, darling, Beatrice replied. Her voice was sharp, impatient. Once we have the cash, we leave for the airport. We meet Tyler in the Caymans on Monday. By the time the old fool realizes what's happening, the accounts will be drained and will be untouchable. Tyler. The name hit me harder than the sight of the double. Tyler Sterling, my son-in-law. The man married to my daughter, Nia. The white boy from Connecticut who worked on Wall Street and looked at me like I was a diversity hire in my own family. He was part of this. Of course he was. Beatrice didn't know how to move money offshore. Beatrice didn't know about the Cayman. Tyler, I don't like waiting, the imposter grumbled. He shifted in his chair and rubbed his left knee. Mine. He was staying in character even when no one was watching. That was professional acting. Stop whining, Beatrice snapped. You're getting 10%. That's $2 million for playing dress up for a few months. Just keep your mouth shut and remember the signature. $2 million. That meant they were planning to take $20 million. They were planning to clean me out. I felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me. This wasn't just greed. This was hatred. You don't do this to someone you simply want to rob. You do this to someone you want to erase. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to invalidate my existence. They wanted to replace me with a puppet so they could pull the string. I looked at my watch. It was 2:15 p.m. Henderson, I said, not taking my eyes off my wife. Do not give them the money. Obviously, Henderson said. I'll go in there, tell them the system is down, and ask them to come back tomorrow. Then we call the FBI. No, I said. No police. Not yet. Henderson frowned. Isaiah, this is fraud. This is identity theft. This is grand larceny. This is family business, I said. If you call the police now, they get arrested for attempted fraud. They get a lawyer. Tyler pays their bail. They claim it was a misunderstanding or a prank. They get a slap on the wrist. And I look like a fool whose wife tried to rob him. I turned to face Henderson. My eyes were burning. I don't want them arrested, Henderson. I want them destroyed. I want them to think they won. I want them to walk out of here believing they are the smartest people in the room. And then, when they are sleeping soundly on their pile of stolen dreams, I am going to bury them. Henderson swallowed hard. So, what do you want me to do? Give them the money, I said. What? Henderson choked. $500,000? Isaiah, it's bait, I said. It's paper. Give it to them. But I want you to put the trackers in the band, the military grade one, and I want you to make sure the serial numbers are recorded. Let them walk out of here with the bag. Let them think the plan worked. Let them think the imposter passed the test. But the retinal scan, override it, I ordered. Use your manager code. Say the scanner is glitching. Apologize to him. Call him Mr. Thorne. Shake his hand. Make him feel like a king. Henderson looked at me for a long moment. He saw the look on my face. It was the same look I had in 1992 when I bankrupted a rival developer who tried to burn down my construction site. It was the look of a man who was done playing defense. All right, Henderson said quietly. I'll do it. But Isaiah, be careful. That man in there, he isn't just an actor. He has your face. He has your life. If he decides he wants to keep it, you are the only loose end. I looked back through the glass. The imposter was laughing at something Beatrice said. He threw his head back. It was my laugh. He can have the face, I whispered, but he doesn't have the soul. And he definitely doesn't have the fight. I watched from the shadows as Henderson entered the lounge. I watched him apologize. I watched him override the system. I watched the teller bring in the heavy canvas bag filled with stacks of $100 bills. I watched Beatrice's eyes light up with a greed so pure it was almost beautiful. She grabbed the bag. She didn't even say thank you. She hooked her arm through the imposter's arm and they walked out of the bank, heads high, triumphant. I waited 2 minutes, then I walked out the back door. I got into my truck. I pulled up the tracking app on my secure phone. A red dot was moving slowly down LaSalle Street. The game had started. They had the money. They had the confidence. They thought Isaiah Thorne was a senile old man inspecting a roof on the south side. They were about to learn that Isaiah Thorne was not the prey. I started the engine. I was the hunter, and the hunt had just begun. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my daughter, Nia. Hi, Daddy. Are you home? Tyler and I are coming over for dinner tonight. We need to talk to you about something important. Love you. I stared at the screen. The circle was complete. Beatrice and the fake me were securing the cash. Tyler and Nia were coming to distract the real me. It was a pincer movement. I typed back with one finger. Looking forward to it, sweetheart. I have a surprise for you too. I put the truck in gear and followed the red dot. I wasn't going home. I had to see where my wife and her new husband were going to hide my money. Please like and subscribe if you want to see how I take down the people who thought they could steal my life. Let me know in the comment. Would you have called the police or would you have done what I did? The nightmare is just beginning. My hand was already on the cold cold steel of the door handle. Every muscle in my body was coiled tight, ready to spring. I was not thinking about the consequence. I was thinking about how it would feel to wrap my fingers around the throat of the man wearing my face and squeeze until the light went out of his eyes. I was going to walk into that lobby and tear them apart. Henderson must have sensed the shift in the air pressure because he slammed his hand against the door, blocking my path. He was a small man, an accountant by trade, soft hands, soft eyes, but in that moment he had the grip of a desperate man. "Isaiah, don't," he hissed, his face pale in the blue light of the monitors. "If you go out there, they run. If they run, the money disappears. If the money disappears, we lose the trail. We lose the network." I looked at it. My breathing was ragged, loud in the small room. I wanted to push him aside. I wanted violence. I had spent 50 years building a reputation as a man you do not cross, a man who built skyscrapers on the south side when the mob tried to burn his equipment. I did not hide behind glass. I confronted my problems. "Let them go," Henderson pleaded, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I put the trackers in the band, military grade. The signal is strong. We can follow them to the ends of the earth. But if you blow this now, if you make a scene in the lobby of the First National Bank, you are just a crazy old man attacking his wife. You go to jail. They go to the Cayman. Is that how you want this to end?" He was right. The logic cut through the red haze of my anger like a knife. I took my hand off the door. I stepped back into the shadows. I turned my eyes to the glass. Beatrice and the imposter were standing up. She adjusted his lapel, her fingers lingering on the silk of the tie I had bought in Milan. She smoothed the fabric over his chest. It was a gesture of ownership. She was proud of him. She was proud of her creation. And then she did it. She leaned in close, standing on her tiptoes, and pressed her lips to cheek. It was not a quick peck. It was slow. It was intimate. She whispered something in his ear, and he smiled. It was my smile. It was the smile I used to give her on Sunday mornings when I brought her coffee in bed. My stomach turned over. This was not just a robbery. This was an erasure. She was not just stealing my money. She was transferring my life to a younger, more obedient vessel. She had found a man who looked like me but would jump when she snapped her finger. She was rewriting our history in real time. They turned and walked toward the exit. The heavy glass doors slid open, and they stepped out into the harsh afternoon sun of Chicago. They looked like the perfect power couple, the distinguished older businessman, his trophy's wife. The world saw Isaiah Thorne. I saw a ghost. Henderson let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 10 minutes. He slumped into the chair in front of the monitor. "They are gone," he said. "The signal is active. They are heading north." I did not move. I stared at the empty lobby on the screen. There was something bothering me, something about the way the man walked. It was subtle, almost invisible to the naked eye, but I had seen it. "Rewind the tape," I said. Henderson looked at me confused. "What? Why?" "We have the tracker. We need to go." "Rewind the tape," I ordered, my voice leaving no room for argument. "Play it back from the moment they stood up from the chairs. I want to see him walk." Henderson typed the command. The video reversed, the figures moving backward in a jerky dance, and then froze. He hit play. I watched the imposter stand up. He put his weight on his right leg first. He used the arm of the chair for leverage, just a slight push, barely noticeable. Then he started to walk toward the door. There it was. Step, drag, step, drag. It was not a limp you would notice if you were not looking for it. It was a rhythm, a hesitation on the left side. He was favoring his left ankle, rolling his weight to the outside of his foot with every stride. "Freeze it," I said. The image stopped. The man was mid-stride, his left foot angled slightly outward. I looked down at my own left leg. I pulled up my pant leg to reveal the thick, knotted scar tissue that ran from my ankle to my shin. It was ugly. It was permanent. It was the legacy of a cold morning in 1985. I was 32 years old, working a job site in Bronzeville. The crane operator was drunk. The steel beam swung loose. It crushed my leg against a concrete pillar. The doctor said I would never walk again. I told them to go to hell. I walked, but I walked with pain. I walked with a reminder that gravity always wins. That injury defined me. It changed the way I stood. It changed the way I moved through the world. It was a private pain. On good days, I could hide it. On bad days, when the damp wind blew off the lake, it felt like someone was driving a hot nail into the bone. But here was this stranger, this actor, this thief, and he was mimicking my pain perfectly. "He does not just look like me," I whispered, more to myself than to Henderson. "He feels like me." Henderson squinted at the screen. "He is good, Isaiah. He is really good. He is too good," I said. "That limp. That is not something you see in a photograph. That is not something you pick up from watching me give a speech at a charity dinner. I hide that limp in public. I wear custom shoes to correct the gait. The only time I walk like that, the only time I let the pain show, is when I am at home." The realization hit me like a physical blow. I thought about the morning, the early hours before the sun came up. I would get out of bed, my joints stiff, my leg throbbing. I would limp to the bathroom, dragging that left foot across the carpet. Beatrice would be in bed, pretending to be asleep. She was watching. She was studying me. She was taking notes. She was memorizing the cadence of my suffering. She wasn't sleeping. She was building a file. She must have spent months teaching this man how to be crippled. She must have drilled him. No, not like that. He leans more to the right, drags the heel. He pauses before he steps. It was a violation deeper than any infidelity. She had taken my pain, my trauma, the physical cost of building this empire, and she had turned it into a costume for a con artist. I looked at Henderson. "Does anyone else have access to the security footage from inside my house?" Henderson Henderson shook his head. Just you and your wife. She trained him, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She brought him into our home when I was traveling, or she recorded me. She dissected me like a frog in a science class. I turned away from the screen. I couldn't look at it anymore. I felt dirty. I felt exposed. I had let a spy into my sanctuary. I had slept next to a woman who looked at my scars and saw a blueprint for a robbery. Where are they now? I asked. Henderson checked tablet. The red dot was moving steady. They are on Lakeshore Drive, heading toward the Gold Coast. They are going to the safe house, I said. I bought a condo there under a shell company 3 years ago. Beatrice knows about it. She thinks I don't check the log. I checked my watch. I had time. But I had to be careful. If they were this prepared, if they had gone to this length to replicate my physical being, they had contingency plan. They had weapons. And they had Tyler Sterling, my son-in-law, the golden boy. He would be the architect of the financial side. Beatrice provided the physical data. Tyler provided the banking code. It was a perfect ecosystem of betrayal. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my burner phone. I sent a text to Darius. Darius was an ex-cop who got kicked off the force for being too rough with the bad guy. Now he worked for me. He was the only person who could find out who this imposter really was. I need a name, I typed. Male, late 60s, resembles me. Check casting agencies for extras. Check former stunt doubles. Check the bottom of the barrel. He has had plastic surgery. Find him. I looked at Henderson one last time. Wipe the tapes, I said. What? Delete the footage from the bank, I ordered. If the police see this, they start asking questions. They start looking for me. I don't want to be found. Not yet. I want to be a ghost. Isaiah, that's destruction of evidence. It's protection of assets, I corrected him. Do it, or I move my accounts to the Caymans myself. Henderson nodded, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Done. It's gone. A system glitch. Good. I walked toward the back exit. My left leg throbbed. The pain was real. It was sharp. It was mine. I stepped out into the alley. The air smelled of exhaust and rain. I climbed into my rusted truck. The engine turned over with a growl. They had my faith. They had my money. They had my secrets. But they made one mistake. They thought they could replicate the man. They forgot that the man was forged in fire. You can copy the scar, but you cannot copy the memory of the wound. I put the truck in gear. I wasn't going to the condo. Not yet. I had to go home. I had to see the stage where she had directed this play. I had to see what else she had stolen. And I had a dinner date with my daughter, Nia, my sweet, weak Nia. She was coming over with Tyler. They were coming to check on the old man, to see if the pills were working, to see if I was confused. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were clear. My hands were steady. I wasn't confused. I was focused. I drove out of the city, merging into the traffic. Just another old man in an old truck. The red dot on my phone screen pulsed, a digital heartbeat leading me to my enemy. They were celebrating right now. They were counting the cash. They were laughing about the limp. Let them laugh. I touched the scar on my leg. The pain was fuel. I was coming for them, and I wasn't going to limp when I arrived. I sat in my leather armchair in the corner of the living room, the only light coming from the street lamp outside, casting long shadows across the floorboard. I was not reading. I was not watching television. I was waiting. The house was silent, but inside my head, the noise was deafening. It was the sound of my life being dismantled piece by piece. At 7:15, the front door opened. Beatrice swept in like a hurricane of performative exhaust. She dragged her Louis Vuitton carry-on across the threshold, letting the wheels clatter loudly against the marble tile. It was a sound designed to announce her arrival, to announce her burden. She dropped her keys on the console table with a heavy sigh that was supposed to tell me she had just survived a 3-hour flight in the chaos of O'Hare International Airport. Isaiah, she called out, her voice pitching up into that sweet register she reserved for when she wanted something. I am home. God, that flight was a nightmare. We sat on the tarmac for 40 minutes. My back is killing me. I did not stand up. I stayed in the chair, my hands resting on the armrests, gripping the leather so hard I could feel the wood frame beneath. I watched her walk into the room. She looked impeccable. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was fresh. She did not look like a woman who had been squeezed into an airline seat. She looked like a woman who had spent the afternoon in a luxury hotel spa. She saw me and stopped. For a fraction of a second, her smile faltered. She saw the darkness in the room. She saw me sitting there like a judge on a bench. But Beatrice is a professional. She recovered instantly. "Oh, honey, why are you sitting in the dark?" she cooed, walking over to turn on the lamp. "You look so lonely. Did you miss me?" She leaned down to kiss me. I smelled it immediately. Underneath her expensive floral perfume, there was something else. A bass note. Musk, sandalwood, and sweat. It was faint, but to a man who has been hunting his whole life, it was as loud as a gunshot. It was the smell of another man. It was the smell of the man I had seen in the bank. I did not pull away. I let her kiss my cheek. I let her poison touch my skin. "I missed you, Beatrice," I said. My voice was raspy dry. "How was Miami?" She straightened up, smiling that bright, lying smile. "Oh, it was humid. Terrible, really, but the gala was a success. They raised $2 million for the children. I wished you were there, Isaiah. Everyone asked about you. Everyone asked about me. The irony was so thick I could taste it." While she was supposedly talking about me in Miami, she was actually standing next to a counterfeit version of me in Chicago robbing my vault. "I brought you something," she said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small wooden box and handed it to me. "I picked these up at the airport. I know you should not be smoking, but a little celebration never hurt anyone, right?" I took the box. Cohiba cigar. The seal was broke. "Thank you, Beatrice," I said, turning the box over in my hand. "You are too good to me." "I am going to take a shower," she said, stretching her arms over her head. "I feel gross. Airplane air there, you know? It sticks to you. She grabbed her suitcase and headed for the stair. I listened to her footstep. I listened to the bedroom door close. I waited 1 minute, then 2. Then I heard the pipes groan as the shower turned on. I moved. I did not limp. The pain in my leg was gone, replaced by a cold adrenaline. I went up the stairs 2 at a time, silent as a ghost. I slipped into the bedroom. The bathroom door was cracked open, steam pouring out, carrying the scent of her lavender body wash. She was humming. She was happy. She thought she had pulled it off. Her suitcase was on the bed, unlocked. I opened it. If she had really been to Miami, there would be telltale sign, baggage claim tags, a boarding pass tucked in a pocket, sand in the shoes, humidity in the fabric. I rifled through the clothes. The silk blouses were neatly folded, not crushed from travel. I checked the side pocket. Nothing. No ticket stubs, no airport receipts. Then I found it. Tucked deep inside the lining of her toiletry bag was a crumbled piece of paper. I smoothed it out. It was a receipt. Not from a hotel in South Beach. Not from the Ritz-Carlton in Key Biscayne. It was from the Drake Oak Brook, a hotel 20 miles west of here. A local getaway. The date was for last night and tonight. Room 304. I stared at the paper. She hadn't even left the county. She had checked into a hotel down the road, probably with the imposter, to rehearse their performance, to coordinate the bank heist, to laugh at the stupid old man she left at home. I put the receipt back exactly where I found it. I closed the suitcase. I picked up the blazer she had been wearing. It was draped over the chair. I brought the fabric to my nose and inhaled deeply. There it was again. That scent. It was stronger now. It wasn't just cologne. It was the smell of the bank. It was the smell of the leather chairs in the private lounge. And beneath that was the smell of fear and excitement. She had hugged him. She had held him close. I heard the water shut off. I was out of the room in 3 seconds, back in my chair downstairs, before she even reached for a towel. My heart was hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I picked up the box of cigars she had given me. I opened it. Inside, tucked between the cigars, was a matchbook. It was plain white, but on the inside cover, someone had written a number, a phone number. I memorized it instantly. The doorbell rang. I checked my watch. 7:45. Right on schedule. The second wave of the attack was here. I walked to the door and opened it. Tyler Sterling stood there, his white teeth gleaming in the porch light. He was wearing a polo shirt, khakis, looking like he just stepped off a yacht he did not own. My daughter Nia was next to him, looking tired, looking small. "Hey, Dad," Tyler said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, a heavy, patronizing hand. "You look good. A little tired maybe, but good." "Hi, Daddy," Nia said. She kissed me, but her eyes darted around the room as if she was looking for something broke. "Come in," I said, closing the door. "Beatrice is just freshening up. She just got back from Miami." "Oh, right, Miami," Tyler said. He exchanged a quick glance with Nia, a glance that lasted a fraction of a second too long. They knew. Of course they knew. They knew she wasn't in Miami. They were part of the script. We went into the dining room. I had ordered food from a local Italian place because Beatrice had told me not to worry about cooking. Tyler sat at the head of the table, my seat. He did it casually as if it was a mistake, but I knew better. It was a territorial mark. He was testing the waters. He was seeing if the old lion still had teeth. Beatrice came down the stairs wrapped in a silk robe, her hair wet. "Nia, Tyler," she exclaimed, acting surprised. "I did not know you were coming for dinner. We wanted to welcome you back," Mom, Nia said. Her voice sounded thin, rehearsed. We sat down. The air in the room was thick enough to choke on. Tyler poured himself a glass of my wine. He swirled it, looking at the legs. So Dad, Tyler started looking at me over the rim of his glass. "Nia and I were worried about you yesterday." "Worried?" I said, picking up a fork. "Why?" "Well, you know," Tyler said. He chuckled a low, condescending sound. "You called us 3 times. I stopped eating. I looked at him. "I did not call you Tyler." Tyler sighed. He looked at Nia, then back at me with an expression of exaggerated pity. "See, this is what I mean. You called us at noon, then again at 2, then again at 4. You were rambling, Dad. You were talking about a roof inspection on the south side. You were confused. You kept asking where Mom was, even though she told you a dozen times she was in Miami." I stared at him. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. It was gaslighting in its purest form. He was trying to plant the seed of dementia. He was trying to create a narrative where I was losing my grip on reality. "I was on a roof," I said, my voice steady. "I was inspecting the warehouse on 35th Street. I did not call you." Nia reached across the table and touched my hand. "Daddy," she said, her eyes filling with fake tears. "I have the call log on my phone. We can show you. You sounded scared. You forgot who Tyler was for a minute." I looked at my daughter, my flesh and blood, the girl I had carried on my shoulders at parades, the girl whose tuition I had paid, for whose car I had bought, whose mistakes I had buried. She was looking me in the eye and lying to my face to help her husband steal my empire. That hurt more than the imposter. That hurt more than Beatrice. That broke something inside me that could never be fixed. "Show me," I said. "Show me the log." Tyler pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and slid it across the mahogany table. There it was. My name. Dad. 3 calls. Yesterday afternoon. I looked closer. The duration of the calls was real. 1 minute, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. But I hadn't made them. Then I realized the imposter. They had used the double. They had given him a phone cloned to my number. They had made him call them so they would have a digital record of my confusion. They were building a paper trail. If they tried to have me declared incompetent, this would be Exhibit A. "Look, Judge," the poor man calls us and doesn't remember. He hallucinates. He wanders. I pushed the phone back. "Technology is a funny thing," I said. "It can be manipulated." Tyler frowned. His eyes narrowed. Dad, nobody is manipulating anything. We are just concerned. You are 72. You have been under a lot of stress. Maybe it is time we talked about scaling back. Scaling back. Beatrice chimed in, pouring herself water. She was watching me closely, analyzing my reaction. Tyler is right, honey. You have worked so hard. Maybe it is time to let the younger generation handle the day-to-day. You could relax. You could fish. Fish, I repeated. Yeah, Tyler said, leaning forward. I have been looking at your portfolio, Isaiah. It is a mess. Old properties, low yield. You are sitting on assets that are rotting. I could modernize it. I could leverage the equity and get you into some high-growth fund. I could take the burden off your shoulders. Leverage the equity. That was Wall Street talk for borrowing against my buildings to gamble on the stock market. He wanted to mortgage my life's work to play roulette. I looked around the table. The three of them. The unholy trinity. My wife, the traitor. My daughter, the pawn. And my son-in-law, the architect. They were circled. They smelled blood. They thought I was confused. They thought the gaslighting was working. I decided to give them what they wanted. I let my hand tremble just a little. I let my fork clatter against the plate. I blinked rapidly as if I was trying to clear a fog from my brain. I don't remember calling. I stammered. My voice wavered. Did I really forget who you were, Tyler? Tyler's face lit up. It was subtle, but I saw it. The predator sensing weakness. Yeah, Dad, you did, but it is okay. It happened. We just want to help. I rubbed my forehead, acting distressed. Maybe you were right. I have been feeling tired lately. The numbers, they get mixed up in my head sometimes. Beatrice reached over and rubbed my back. Oh, you poor dear. See? I told you he needed rest. Nia looked away. She couldn't hold my gaze. Good. She still had a conscience somewhere deep down. I would use that later. Tyler pulled a folded document from his back pocket. He placed it on the table next to the pasta. Since we are talking about it, Dad, I took the liberty of drawing something up. It is just a temporary power of attorney, just for the business account. It would let me handle the vendors and the maintenance while you get some rest, just until you feel better. I looked at the document. It was thick, complex. It wasn't temporary. I could tell by the density of the text. This was a total surrender of asset. You want me to sign this? I asked, my voice weak. Just to be safe, Tyler said. Just so we can take care of you. I reached for the paper. My hand shook violently. I saw Tyler suppress a smile. I cannot sign this now, I said, pushing it away. My eyes, they are blurry. I need my reading glasses and I need to sleep. I am so confused. Of course, Dad, Tyler said, snatching the paper back before I could read the fine print. No rush. We can go to my office tomorrow. We can do it properly. Get a notary. Make it official. Tomorrow, Beatrice agreed. You sleep in tomorrow, Isaiah. I will make you a big breakfast. They stood up. The dinner was over. They had gotten what they wanted. The admission of weakness. The agreement to sign. I walked them to the door. I walked with a heavy limp, dragging my left leg exactly the way the imposter did. I saw Beatrice watching my leg. She smiled. She thought her training had been perfect. She thought she was looking at the man she had broken. Good night, Daddy. Nia whispered, kissing my cheek. Good night, Princess, I said. Tyler shook my hand. His grip was crushing, dominant. See you tomorrow, Isaiah. Rest up, big day. I closed the door. I locked it. I stood in the hallway listening to their car drive away. The mask dropped from my face. My posture straightened. The trembling in my hand vanished. They thought tomorrow was going to be their victory lap. They thought I was going to walk into Tyler's office and sign away 50 years of blood and sweat. I walked into the kitchen. I picked up the box of cigars. I took out the matchbook with the number. I pulled out my burner phone and dialed. It rang twice. Yeah? A voice answered. Rough, deep. It is Isaiah, I said. I found your receipt, Luther, and I saw your performance at the bank. It was good. But you dragged the left leg too much on the turn. There was a silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. Who is this? The voice asked, tight with fear. I am the man whose face you are wearing, said. And I am the man who is going to offer you a deal. You can work for them and go to prison for fraud. Or you can work for me and walk away with more money than you have ever seen. I waited. I am listening, the imposter said. Meet me, I said. The old warehouse on 35th, 1 hour. Come alone, or don't come at all. I hung up. I looked at the stairs. Beatrice was up there, probably texting Tyler, probably celebrating. She thought I was confused. She thought I was old. I turned off the lights. I was not confused. I was just getting started. Tomorrow I would go to Tyler's office, but I would not be signing his papers. I would be bringing my own, and I would be bringing a ghost. The crash of the crystal glass against the hardwood floor was louder than a gunshot in the silent dining room. I watched the water spread across the polished mahogany table, dripping onto the Persian rug my first wife had bought in 1982. I did not move to clean it up. I let my hand hang in the air, trembling slightly. My fingers curled into a claw as if they had simply stopped working. I was acting, of course. I had released the glass with calculated precision, timing it exactly when Tyler was raising his wine glass to his lip. I wanted to see their reaction. I wanted to see the script they had rehearsed. It happened in a microsecond. Tyler did not look at the mess. He did not look at me with concern. His eyes darted instantly to Beatrice at the other end of the table. He gave her a single sharp nod, a wink. It was the signal, the starting gun. Oh, Isaiah, Beatrice cried out, rushing to my side with a napkin. Her voice was pitched high, a performance of distress. You are shaking. Look at your hand. You are soaking wet. I am fine, I muttered, allowing a slur to creep into my voice. It just slipped. My fingers, they feel numb. Nia sat frozen, looking between her husband and her mother. I saw the conflict in her eye. She wanted to believe it was an accident, but the seed had been planted. Tyler leaned forward, his face composed into a mask of grave concern. Dad, this is the third time this week, he lied smoothly. Yesterday you dropped your keys. The day before you couldn't hold your coffee. We can't ignore this anymore. It is neurological. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. I had not dropped anything in 20 years. My hands were steady enough to thread a fishing line in a gale, but he was building the narrative brick by lie. I am just tired, I said, looking down at my lap. We are calling a specialist, Tyler announced, pulling out his phone. I have a friend, Dr. Vance. He is the best neurologist in Chicago. He owes me a favor. I will get him here first thing tomorrow. No doctors, I grumbled, playing the part of the stubborn old man. It is not up for discussion, Isaiah, Beatrice said, gripping my shoulder. Her nails dug in just a little too hard. We are doing this for your own good. The next morning, the doorbell rang at 8 sharp. I was sitting in the kitchen, drinking black coffee, watching the steam rise. Beatrice had taken the coffee away from me earlier, replacing it with herbal tea, saying the caffeine was bad for my tremors. I poured the tea down the sink when she went to answer the door. Tyler walked in first, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. Behind him was a man who looked less like a doctor and more like a country club regular. He was tall, tanned, with teeth that were too white and a smile that didn't reach his eye. Dad, this is Dr. Vance, Tyler said. He cleared his schedule to see you. Dr. Vance did not shake my hand. He looked at me the way a mechanic looks at a car that has been totaled. He set a leather bag on the table. Good morning, Mr. Thorne, Vance said. Tyler tells me you have been having some episodes. Confusion, motor control issues, aggression. That was a new one. They were adding layers to the diagnosis. I am fine, I said. Just a slipped glass. Let's have a look, shall we? Vance said. He pulled out a penlight and shone it in my eyes. He tapped my knees with a rubber hammer. It was a farce, a medical pantomime. He asked me questions, rapid fire. Who is the president? What year is it? Count backward from 100 by 7. I answered them all correctly. I saw the flicker of annoyance in Vance's eyes. He didn't want right answers. He wanted failure. So, he changed the game. He pulled out a tablet and showed me a series of shapes. Which one doesn't belong? He asked. I pointed to the triangle. Wrong, he said quickly. It's the square. Look again. You are not focusing. I pointed again. It is the triangle. Mr. Thorne, agitation is a common symptom, Vance said, turning to Tyler. He is defensive. He is hiding his deficits. He turned back to me. Do you remember calling your daughter yesterday? Do you remember wandering in the garden at 3 a.m.? I did not wander, I said, my voice rising. See? Beatrice whispered loudly. The anger. It comes out of nowhere. Vance nodded gravely. He stood up and walked over to Tyler and Beatrice. They huddled in the corner of the kitchen, whispering, but they made sure I could hear the important word. Early onset. Rapid deterioration. Safety risk. Vance turned back to me. He pulled a prescription pad from his pocket. Mr. Thorne, based on my examination and the family history provided by your wife and son-in-law, it appears you are suffering from the early stages of Alzheimer's, aggravated by vascular dementia. It is progressing aggressively. The sentence hung in the air. It was a death sentence, not for my body, but for my freedom. If this diagnosis went into my medical file, my signature became worthless. My testimony became invalid. I became a ghost in my own life. I stared at Vance. I noticed the tan line on his left wrist where a watch. I noticed the callus on his left hand from gripping a golf club. He wasn't a specialist. He was Tyler's golfing buddy. I had seen him in photos on Tyler's social media, holding a scotch on the 19th hole. You are sure? I asked. No MRI? No blood work? The clinical signs are definitive, Vance said, handing a slip of paper to Beatrice. We need to start him on medication immediately to slow the decline. This is a new compound, very effective for mood stabilization and cognitive retention. He reached into his bag and pulled out a sample bottle. It was unlabeled, just an orange plastic container. Start with these today, Vance said. 2 in the morning, 2 at night. It will help him sleep. It will keep him calm. Tyler walked Vance to the door. I heard them laughing in the hallway. Tea time on Sunday? I heard Vance say. Absolutely, Tyler replied. Beatrice came back to the table. She held the orange bottle like it was a holy relic. She shook 2 pills into her hand. They were blue, oblong, innocent looking. Here, honey, she said, filling a glass of water. Doctor, Vance says these will make you feel better. Do it for me. Do it for Nia. I looked at the pills. I looked at her face. It was a mask of concern, but her eyes were cold, calculating. She needed me sedated. She needed me pliable. She needed me to be the drooling old man they claimed I was, so that when they dragged me to the notary, I would sign whatever they put in front of me. I took the pills. I put them in my mouth. I took a drink of water. I swallowed hard, exaggerating the motion of my throat. Good boy, Beatrice said. She actually patted my head. Why don't you go lie down? The medicine works best if you rest. I nodded slowly, letting my eyelids droop. I feel tired already, I mumbled. I shuffled toward the bedroom, dragging my left leg. As soon as I closed the door, I locked it. I rushed to the bathroom and spit the pills into a tissue. I had tucked them under my tongue, a trick I learned growing up on the streets when the dealers tried to force feed you product to get you hooked. I examined the blue pills. They had no mark, no pharmaceutical code, just smooth, blue death. I wrapped them carefully in the tissue and put them in a small Ziploc bag I kept in my shaving kit. I needed to know what they were feeding me. I waited an hour. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the house. I could hear Beatrice downstairs on the phone. phone. She was speaking in a low, excited voice. He took them. Yes, Vance was perfect. We have the diagnosis. We can move on the power of attorney next week. I slipped out the window. My bedroom was on the first floor facing the back garden. I moved through the hedges, avoiding the security cameras I knew Beatrice monitored. I made it to the alley behind the house where I had parked my truck 3 blocks away the night before, anticipating I might need a quiet exit. I drove straight to the industrial district, to a nondescript brick building with barred window. This was Darius's office. Darius didn't just find people, he found truth. He had a chemist on retainer, a guy who used to cook for the cartels before he got clean and found God. I walked in and tossed the baggie on Darius' desk. Tell me what my wife is trying to feed me, he said. Darius looked at the pills, then at me. He didn't ask questions. He picked up the phone. 2 hours later, we were sitting in the back room. The chemist, a skinny guy named Silva, walked in holding a printout. He looked nervous. Mr. Thorne, Silva said, you didn't take these, did you? No, I said. I spit them out. Thank God, Silva said. He placed the paper on the table. This isn't Alzheimer's medication. This is a custom cocktail. High-grade benzodiazepines mixed with a synthetic hallucinogen similar to LSD, but designed to induce paranoia and confusion. He pointed to a chemical structure on the page. And this is scopolamine, devil's breath. It makes you suggestible. It turns off the part of your brain that says no. If you took this for a week, you would sign your own death warrant and thank them for the pen. You wouldn't just look crazy, mister. You would be crazy. You would see things that aren't there. You would forget your own name. I felt a cold rage settle in my gut. It was heavier than lead. They weren't just gaslighting. They were chemically lobotomized. They wanted to erase Isaiah Thorne and leave a husk that could hold a pen. They wanted to parade me in front of a judge, drooling and terrified, so they could take guardianship and strip the flesh from my bone. Tyler. It had to be Tyler. Beatrice was greedy, but she wasn't a chemist. Tyler knew people. He knew the dark corners of the market. He had sourced this. So, Darius said, leaning back in his chair, they want to make you crazy. What's the play, boss? I looked at the blue pill. The play is simple, I said. I am going to take my medicine, or at least they are going to think I am. I turned to Silva. Can you make duplicates? I asked. Same shape, same color, same weight, but sugar, just sugar pills. Silva nodded. Easy. Give me 3 hours. Good, I said. Make me a bottle. I am going to go home. I am going to swallow their poison right in front of their eyes, and then I am going to give them the show of a lifetime. I stood up. My limp was gone. My mind was sharper than a razor. They want a crazy old man? I said, picking up the printout. I will give them King Lear. I will give them a man losing his mind. And while they are watching the performance, while they are laughing at the old fool chasing ghosts, I will be tightening the noose around their neck. I drove back to the house. I climbed back through the window. I unlocked the bedroom door and lay on the bed. When Beatrice came in to check on me, I was staring at the wall, muttering numbers under my breath. 7, 14, 21, I whispered, my eyes wide and unblinking. Beatrice smiled. It was the smile of a predator watching the prey stumble. It's working, she whispered to herself. She didn't know I was counting the days until her life fell apart. 7 days. That was all I needed. 7 days to twist the knife. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster while my wife prepared to leave the house. It was 11 at night. Beatrice thought I was comatose, lost in the chemical fog of the blue pills I had pretended to swallow hours earlier. She hummed to herself as she applied fresh lipstick in the vanity mirror, a shade of crimson she usually reserved for gala events. She sprayed a mist of perfume on her neck, the scent drifting into the bedroom like a cloying fog. I am going to check on my mother, she whispered to my unmoving form. She isn't feeling well. Don't wait up. I did not twitch. I let my breathing remain shallow and rhythmic. I waited until I heard the front door click shut and the purr of her Mercedes fading down the driveway before I opened my eyes. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Darius. I have her, the text read. She isn't going to her mother's. She is heading to the west side. You need to see that. I slipped out of bed. My joints ached, a real ache this time, not the phantom pain I performed for my family. I dressed in black, pulling a baseball cap low over my... I moved through the house that was no longer a home, bypassing the squeaky floorboard on the third step, avoiding the motion sensors I had installed myself. I was a burglar in my own... Darius was waiting 2 blocks away in a nondescript sedan that smelled of stale coffee and tobacco. He didn't say a word as I climbed in. He just handed me a tablet streaming a live feed from a drone. We followed her. Beatrice drove with a lead foot, weaving through traffic with an urgency that betrayed her calm facade. She didn't drive toward the nursing home where her mother lived. She drove toward a neighborhood where the streetlights were broken and the buildings leaned against each other like tired drunks. She pulled up to a crumbling brick tenement on Ogden Avenue. It was a place for people who didn't want to be found. She went inside. Darius parked around the corner. We sat in the dark watching the 4th floor window. A light flickered on. I saw 2 silhouettes against the yellow shade. One was Beatrice, the other was me. It is a visceral, nauseating thing to see your own silhouette moving without you. It creates a hollow feeling in the pit of your stomach, a primal rejection of reality. Who is he? I asked Darius. My voice was tight. Darius handed me a manila folder. I did some digging while you were playing patient. I ran facial recognition on the footage from the bank. It took a while because of the surgery, but I got a hit on an old mugshot from 1998. I I opened the folder. The face staring back at me was younger, smoother, but the eyes were the same. His name is Luther Bank, Darius said. Unemployed actor. Seasonal Santa Claus at the mall. 3 DUIs. A gambling debt that would make a bookie blush. And get this, 10 years ago, he was on your payroll. I frowned. I never hired an actor. Think back, Darius said. The documentary. Titans of Chicago. The PBS special. The memory hit me like a splash of ice water. The documentary crew had followed me for 3 weeks. They needed a stand-in for the lighting checks because I refused to sit still for hours while they fiddled with the equipment. They hired a local guy. A guy with my build. A guy with my skin tone. I looked at the mugshot again. I remembered him. Luther. He had been quiet, respectful. He had told me he admired my work. He had told me he wanted to be like me. Be careful what you wish for, I whispered. He fell off the map about 5 years ago, Darius continued, until 3 months ago. That is when a shell company registered to your son-in-law Tyler wired $50,000 to a private clinic in Brazil. Brazil? Medical tourism, Darius said. Or in this case, identity reconstruction. They didn't just find a guy who looked like you. They paid for cheek implant. They paid for a nose reshaping. They paid to have his hairline adjusted to match your recession. I felt sick. Beatrice and Tyler had turned a human being into a canvas. They had carved my face onto a stranger. The light in the apartment window went out. A few minutes later, Beatrice emerged. She looked flushed, almost manic. She got into her car and sped away. Let's go pay Luther a visit, I said. We waited until her taillights disappeared. Then we moved. The building smelled of boiled cabbage and urine. We climbed the stairs, the wood groaning under our weight. Apartment 4B. The door was thin, cheap plywood. Darius didn't knock. He used a pick gun, and the lock clicked open in 3 seconds. We stepped inside. The apartment was a shrine to Isaiah Thorne. My photos were taped to the wall. Candid shots taken from bushes. Photos of me eating. Photos of me walking. Photos of me arguing with contractors. There were diagrams of my daily routine. There were maps of the bank layout. And sitting in a recliner in the center of the room, wearing a silk robe that I realized with a jolt was actually mine, stolen from my donation pile last month, was Luther Bank. He was drunk. A half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey sat on the floor next to a stack of cash. He looked up as we entered. His eyes were bleary, unfocused. When he saw me, he didn't scream. He didn't reach for a weapon. He laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound. I knew the hallucinations would start, Luther slurred, pointing a shaking finger at me. She said the pills might make me see double, but damn, you look real. I walked over to him. I stood over him. I looked down at my own face, twisted by alcohol and greed. Up close, I could see the faint white scars around his ears where the skin had been pulled tight. I could see the rawness of his nose. I am real, Luther, I said. He blinked. He squinted. The smile slid off his face like oil. Oh, he whispered. Oh no. He tried to scramble up, but he tangled his legs in the robe and fell back. Darius kicked the bottle away and stood by the door, arms crossed. Isaiah, Luther stammered. Mr. Thorne, I can explain. You can explain why you are wearing my face, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You can explain why you were holding my wife's hand today. Luther began to weep. It was pathetic. It was horrifying to see myself crying like a broken child. They made me, he sobbed. That woman, your wife, she is a witch. She found me at the shelter. She told me I could be a king. She told me I could have dignity again. Dignity? I gestured around the filthy room. This is dignity? It was a job, Luther pleaded. Just a job. Acting, that's all. I looked at the table next to the chair. There was a notebook. I picked it up. It was a training manual. Page 1, the walk. Left leg drags. Put weight on the outer heel. Wince when stepping up. Page 2, the signature. Rows and rows of my name practiced over and over until the ink bled through the paper. Loop the T, sharp finish on the E. Page 3, the biometric. I froze. There were detailed schematics of the bank's retinal scanner, and taped to the page were 2 high-resolution contact lenses. They gave me the eyes, Luther whispered, seeing what I was looking at. Tyler got them from a guy in Russia. 3D printed contact, copied from high-res photos of your eye. He said the scanner is old. It only checks the pattern, not the blood flow. I stared at the lens. They were intricate, terrifying works of art. Tyler, my son-in-law, the finance bro. He hadn't just leveraged my assets. He had hacked my biology. How much? I asked. Luther wiped his nose. 10 grand up front, 10 grand a month, and a bonus when we finish the job. What is the finish? I asked. Luther hesitated. He looked at Darius, then back at me. Beatrice said, she said you were sick. She said you were losing your mind. She said you were going to ruin the family. She said I was a humanitarian intervention. I was stepping in to save the legacy. He believed it, or he wanted to believe. He was a desperate man who had been sold a hero narrative by a sociopath. And after? I asked. After they drain the accounts, what happens to you? Ticket to Thailand, Luther said. One way, retirement. I looked at Darius. We both knew the truth. There was no ticket to Thailand. Beatrice and Tyler weren't going to leave a loose end walking around with my fate. Luther was going to have an accident, a drug overdose, a suicide, and it would be convenient because if the body was found, everyone would think Isaiah Thorne had killed himself in a dingy apartment. They were going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They rob me, then they kill my double to fake my death, leaving them with the estate and no husband to worry about. Luther, I said, leaning in close. You are a good actor. I saw you at the bank. You had the limp down perfectly. Luther puffed up slightly, a flicker of pride cutting through the fear. I studied studied you for months. I watched videos. I lived in your skin. Good, I said, because I have a new role for you. It is the role of a lifetime. Luther looked confused. What? You think you are going to Thailand? I asked. Beatrice brought you a bottle of whiskey tonight, didn't she? Luther nodded. A gift for a good day's work. I picked up the bottle Darius had kicked. I held it up to the light. The seal had been tampered with, just a pinprick. Darius, check the liquid, I said. Darius pulled a test strip from his jacket. He came prepared. He dipped it in the whiskey. It turned bright red. Fentanyl, Darius said flat. Enough to kill a horse. Luther turned white. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a whack figure. She tried to close the loop, I said. Tonight, you were supposed to drink this and go to sleep forever. And tomorrow the headlines would say Isaiah Thorne was found dead in a drug den. Luther started to shake. Violent, full-body tremors. You saved my life, he whispered. I didn't save you, I said coldly. I postponed you. I sat down on the edge of the coffee table. Here is the deal, Luther. You work for me now. You are going to keep being Isaiah Thorne, but you are going to say what I tell you to say. You are going to go where I tell you to go, and you are going to help me bury the people who tried to kill us both. Luther nodded frantically. Anything you want. I want you to go to the appointment tomorrow, I said. The one Tyler set up. The one where I am supposed to sign the power of attorney. But you said, I am not going, I said. You are. You are going to walk in there. You are going to limp. You are going to shake. You are going to look confused, and you are going to sign the papers. Luther looked terrified. But if I sign, they win. I smiled. It was a cold smile. No, Luther, they don't win, because the papers you are going to sign aren't the ones Tyler wrote. We are going to switch them. You are going to sign a confession. You are going to sign a transfer of liability. You are going to sign their death warrant. I stood up. Get cleaned up, I ordered. You smell like a distillery. You have a big day tomorrow. You have to be me. And I have high standards. I walked to the door. I paused and looked back at the man wearing my face. And Luther? Yes, Mr. Thorne? If you try to run, if you try to call her, if you try to deviate from the script by one syllable, Darius will not use a test strip next time. I left him shivering in the dark. We walked back to the car. The city was quiet. You trust him? Darius asked. No, I said. But he is scared, and fear is a better motivator than money. I looked at my watch. It was 3 in the morning. Beatrice was sleeping soundly, dreaming of her million. Tyler was probably polishing his golf club. They had built a monster. They had manufactured a fake Isaiah Thorne. Tomorrow I was going to introduce them to the real one, and I was going to show them that something cannot be copied. The living room of my house felt smaller than it had 24 hours. It was the same room where I had hosted mayors and aldermen, where I had negotiated deals that reshaped the Chicago skyline. But tonight, it felt like a cage. Tyler Sterling was pacing back and forth on my Persian rug, his Italian loafers sinking into the wool. He was sucking all the oxygen out of the room. My daughter Nia sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. Beatrice was next to her, playing the role of the grieving wife before the body was even cold. I sat in my armchair, the leather warm against my back. I was wearing my old cardigan, the one with the hole in the elbow. I had let my beard grow out a millimeter too long. I kept my mouth slightly open. I stared at a speck of dust floating in the lamplight. I was giving them exactly what they wanted to see. A husk. A man whose hard drive had been wiped clean by age and medication. We need to be realistic, Nia, Tyler said, stopping his pacing to loom over my daughter. He did not look at me. To him, I was furniture. Dr. Vance was very clear. The decline is rapid. Yesterday, he forgot who I was. Today, he was wandering the garden talking to people who aren't there. If we don't lock down the assets now, he could sign everything away to a scammer on the internet. He could lose the house. He could lose your inheritance. Nia looked at me. Her eyes were wet. Daddy, she whispered. Is it true? Do you feel confused? I blinked slowly. I turned my head toward her, making the movement jerky, uncoordinated. I looked at her, but I focused my eyes on her ear, not her pupil. It created a vacant, 1,000-yard stare that I knew was unsettling. I wanted to go fishing, I mumbled. My voice was a gravelly whisper. The bluegills are running. Did your mother make sandwiches? Nia put her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. See? Beatrice said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. She reached out and patted my. He thinks it is 1995. He thinks I am his first wife. It is heartbreaking, Nia. But we have to be strong. We have to protect him from himself. Tyler pulled a thick document from his briefcase. The sound of the zipper was sharp, aggressive. He laid the papers on the coffee table. This is a comprehensive power of attorney, Tyler explained, his voice taking on that smooth boardroom cadence he used when he was trying to sell junk bonds to widows. It transfers full control of the estate, the business holdings, and the medical decisions to Beatrice. It allows us to freeze the accounts so he can't be taken advantage of. It allows us to manage the properties so they don't fall into disrepair. He looked at Nia. I need you to sign as a witness, honey. And then we need Isaiah to sign. Nia hesitated. But shouldn't we wait? Shouldn't we get a second opinion? We don't have time, Tyler snapped. His mask slipped for a second, revealing the predator underneath. He took a breath and softened his tone. Baby, listen to me. Every day we wait is a risk. What What if he walks into a casino? What if he transfers the deed to this house to a nurse? We are doing this for him. This is love, Nia. This is what protection looks like. He held out a pen. A Mont Blanc. My Mont Blanc. He had taken it from my study. Nia took the pen. Her hand shook. She signed. I watched her sign away my life. I watched my daughter, the girl I had protected from every storm, hand the keys to the castle to the wolf standing in her living room. It broke my heart, but it also hardened it. It turned the last remaining soft tissue in my chest into stone. Now, Tyler said, turning to me. He picked up the document and the pen. He walked over and knelt beside my chair. He got close, too close. I could smell his cologne, something musky and expensive. I could see the pores on his nose. Isaiah, he said, speaking slowly and loudly, as if I were deaf. We need you to sign this paper. It is for the fishing trip, remember? You need to sign the permit so we can go fishing. He thought I was an idiot. He thought he could manipulate me with a child's lie. I looked at the paper. I saw the words irrevocable power of attorney, transfer of asset, medical guardianship. I looked at Tyler. His blue eyes were bright with greed. There was no compassion there. There was only the thrill of the kill. He was a white man in his 30s who had never built anything in his life, looking at a black man in his 70s who had built an empire from the dirt up, and all he saw was a resource to be mined. There was a smugness in his set jaw, a subtle curl of his lip that said he believed this was the natural order of things. The strong take from the weak, the young eat the old. I reached for the pen. I let my hand tremble violently. I missed it the first. Tyler sighed, an impatient sound, and pressed the pen into my fingers. Right here, old timer, he said, tapping the signature line. Just make your mark. I held the pen over the paper. I let the tip hover, creating a small blot of ink. The Georgia land. It was. Tyler froze. What? I want to go to Georgia, I stammered. The farm. My daddy's farm. Tyler rolled his eyes. He looked at Beatrice. He is looping. Just get him to sign. Beatrice leaned in. Yes, honey. We will go to Georgia. Just sign the paper and we will go. I pressed the pen to the paper. I did not sign my name. I did not sign Isaiah Thorne. I let my hand spasm. I drew a jagged, illegible line that looked like a seismograph of an earthquake. It trailed off the line and tore the paper slightly. There, Tyler said, snatching the document away before I could ruin it further. That count. That is intent. We have witnessed. He stood up, checking the signature. He looked triumphant. He looked like he had just won the Super Bowl. He folded the document and slid it into his briefcase. You did good, Isaiah, he said. Now you can go back to sleep. I let my head drop to my chest. I let my mouth hang open. I started to hum a low, tuneless melody. Nia stood up. I can't stay, she said, her voice thick with tears. I can't see him like this. It is too much. Go, Tyler said gently. Go home, babe. I will stay here and help your mom get him settled. I need to go over some of the logistics with her anyway. Nia kissed my forehead. I smelled the salt of her tears. I am sorry, Daddy, she whispered. She left. The front door closed. The energy in the room shifted instantly. The pretense of care evaporated. Tyler walked over to the sidebar and poured himself a drink. He didn't ask. He just took. Beatrice sat on the sofa, kicking off her heels. She looked at me with pure disgust. God, look at him, she said. He is drooling. It is pathetic. It is necessary, Tyler said, taking a sip of scotch. The lawyer said we needed a visible decline. We got it. That signature is garbage, but with the doctor's note and Nia's witness testimony, it will hold up until we can get the competency hearing. He walked over to Beatrice and clinked his glass against hers. To the future, he said. To freedom, she replied. They drank. They ignored me. I was just a piece of furniture now, a broken lamp in the corner. So, Tyler said, lowering his voice, but not enough. He was too arrogant. He thought I was in a different universe. What is the timeline on the liquidation? Beatrice swirled her drink. We have to move fast. Once he is in the facility, we have full control. But the market is volatile. Forget the market, Tyler said. He leaned in close to her, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I have a buyer for the Georgia tract, a developer from Atlanta. They want to turn that old farmland into a logistics hub, warehouse, Amazon distribution. They are offering cash. Beatrice's eyes widened. The ancestral land? Isaiah always said that was sacred. He said his grandfather bought it with his freedom. He made me promise never to sell it. Tyler laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. Fuck his promise and fuck his grandfather. That land is worth $12 million. As soon as the old man is locked up in the psych ward, we sell it. We sell the Chicago building. We liquidate the portfolio. We take the cash and we bury it in the offshore accounts set up. By the time he dies, there will be nothing left but dust. Beatrice smiled, a slow, cruel smile. He loves that land, said. He talks about being buried there. Well, Tyler said, draining his glass, he can be buried in a pauper's grave for all I care. He is done, Beatrice. He is yesterday's news. We are the future. I sat there staring at the dust mote. Inside, my heart was beating a war drum. The Georgia land. It wasn't just dirt, it was blood. My grandfather was a sharecropper who saved every penny for 30 years to buy those 100 acres. My father defended it with a shotgun against the Klan in the 60s. I had held on to it through 3 recessions. It was the only thing I truly owned. Everything else was business. That land was my soul. And this man, this outsider, this vulture in a polo shirt, was going to pave it over for a warehouse. I felt the weight of the recorder in my breast pocket. It was an old digital dictaphone, slim and black. I had turned it on before they walked in. The red light was taped over. It was recording every word, every insult, every confession. When this old man goes into the mental hospital, we sell the Georgia land. He had said it. He had said the quiet part out loud. He had admitted that the goal was not protection, but liquidation. He had admitted that the institutional sensationalization was a means to an end. This recording was a dagger. It proved conspiracy. It proved malice. It proved fraud. But I wasn't going to use it yet. Not yet. I watched them celebrate. I watched Tyler put his hand on my wife's knee. I watched them toast to my destruction. They thought I was finished. They thought the game was over. I closed my eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. "Sleep tight, old man," Tyler mocked. I wasn't sleeping. I was plotting. Tomorrow, they were taking me to Tyler's lawyer to sign the official papers. They were bringing the notary. They were bringing the stamp. They didn't know I had a meeting of my own tonight. Luther was waiting. The script was written. And tomorrow, Tyler Sterling was going to sign his own death warrant. He wanted to sell my grandfather's land. I was going to make sure he spent the rest of his life in a cell so small he would have to step outside to change his mind. The show was just beginning. The elevator ride to the 40th floor of the Sterling and Vance law firm was silent, save for the hum of the machinery and the tapping of Tyler's Italian loafer against the marble floor. I stood in the corner of the car, my head bowed, my hands trembling rhythmically at my side. I was wearing a stained cardigan and trousers that were 2 inches too short, a costume I had selected carefully from the back of my closet. Beatrice stood next to me, gripping my elbow with a force that would leave bruises. To the casual observer, she was a supportive wife holding up her failing husband. To me, she was a jailer dragging a prisoner to the gallows. We stepped out into a lobby that smelled of old money and new leather. The receptionist, a young woman with a headset, didn't even look at me. She smiled at Tyler. "Mr. Sterling, they are waiting for you in conference room B." Tyler nodded, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked like a man who had already won the lottery and was just waiting for the check to clear. He led us down a long hallway lined with abstract art that cost more than my first house. I shuffled behind him, dragging my left leg, muttering nonsense under my breath about the weather in Georgia and the price of corn. We entered the conference room. It was a glass box floating in the sky, overlooking the city I had helped build. At the head of the table sat Arthur Vance, Tyler's personal attorney. He was a man with a face like a bulldog and a reputation for burying bodies, legally speaking. Arthur stood up, smoothing his tie. "Tyler, good to see you. Beatrice. And this must be Isaiah." I stared at him with a vacant expression, my mouth slightly open. Who is this man?" I asked, my voice wavering. "Is he the boat captain?" Tyler chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "No, Dad. This is Mr. Vance. He is going to help us with the papers. Remember? For the fishing trip." I sat down heavily in one of the leather chairs. I clutched a battered old briefcase to my chest. It was a prop I had insisted on bringing, telling Beatrice it contained my fishing lure. In reality, it contained the instrument of their destruction. Arthur slid a thick document across the polished table. It was bound in a blue folder. The title page read, "General Durable Power of Attorney." "Here we are," Arthur said, his voice dripping with false patience. "This grants Beatrice and Tyler full authority over your assets, real estate, and banking. It also includes the medical directive we discussed. It is standard boilerplate, really. Just a formality to keep things running smoothly." Tyler picked up a pen, a heavy gold-plated fountain pen. He handed it to me. "Okay, Dad, just like we practiced. Sign on the line next to the X. Then we can go get some ice cream." Ice cream. He was talking to a man who had negotiated with union bosses in the dead of winter, and he was offering me ice cream. I took the pen. My hand shook so violently that ink splattered onto the table. Beatrice hissed in annoyance and grabbed a tissue to wipe it up. I can't see the line," I whined. "It is too small. Where are my glasses?" "You don't need glasses, Isaiah," Beatrice snapped. "Just sign at the bottom." I fumbled with the document. I flipped the pages clumsily, tearing the corner of one. I started to hyperventilate, making short, wheezing sounds. I need my drops," I gasped. My eyes, they burned. Tyler sighed, running a hand through his perfect hair. "Jesus, Dad, just sign the damn paper." I dropped the pen. It rolled under the table. "Oh no," I cried. "My pen, my lucky pen." I bent down to retrieve it. It was a struggle. I groaned, leaning over the side of the chair. Beatrice rolled her eyes and looked at Tyler. "Help him," she mouthed. Tyler bent down on the other side of the table to look for the pen. Beatrice was distracted, looking at her phone. Arthur was checking his watch. In that split second of chaos, beneath the shelter of the table's edge, my hands stopped shaking. I moved with the speed of a card shark. I opened my battered briefcase just an inch. I slid Tyler's blue folder inside and pulled out an identical blue folder. The swap took less than 2 seconds. I came back up, flushed and panting, clutching the pen and the new folder. I slammed the folder onto the table, slightly askew. "I found it," I shouted triumphantly. "I found the pen. Good, Dad." "Great," Tyler said, straightening a tie. He didn't look at the folder. Why would he? It was blue. It was on the table. It was exactly where he left it. His arrogance was his blindfold. "Now sign," Tyler ordered. I opened the folder to the signature page. It looked exactly like the one they had prepared. Same font, same layout. But the text above the signature line was different. Very different. This was not a power of attorney. This was a confession of judgment and assumption of liability. By signing this document as a witness and co-signatory, Tyler Sterling was not gaining control of my assets. He was accepting full personal liability for the debts of a shell company I had created years ago, Thorne Distress Assets, LLC, a company that currently held $40 million in toxic loans and pending EPA fines. I had also included a clause that explicitly stated the signer acknowledged the principal, me, was of sound mind, and that the signer was entering this agreement freely to relieve the principal of financial burden. I pressed the pen to the paper. I hesitated. Is this for the farm?" I asked asked, looking at Tyler with wide, watery eyes. Yes, Dad, Tyler said, his patience snapping. It is for the farm. Sign it so we can save the farm. I signed. I made my signature shaky, but legible enough to hold up in court. Isaiah Thorne. Now you, Beatrice said. She signed her name quickly, greedily. And you, Tyler, Arthur said. You need to sign as the secondary agent and guarantor. Tyler grabbed the pen. He didn't read a single word. He didn't check the clause. He just saw the empty line next to his name and scribbled his signature with a flourish. He just signed his life away. He just agreed to pay $40 million he didn't have. Arthur notarized it with a heavy thump of his stamp. Done, Arthur said, closing the folder. Congratulations, Tyler. You are now the captain of the ship. Tyler leaned back in his chair, a smug grin spreading across his face. He looked at me with pure contempt. Thanks, Arthur. We will take it from here. You can send the bill to the estate. He picked up the folder, my folder, and tucked it under his arm. He was holding a bomb, and he was smiling about it. Come on, old man, Tyler said, standing up. Let's get you home. I have some calls to make. I stood up, clutching my briefcase. I let a little drool escape the corner of my mouth. Beatrice wiped it away with a grimace. Did we catch the fish? I asked. Yeah, Dad, Tyler laughed. We caught the big one. We walked out of the office. The receptionist smiled at Tyler again. The elevator doors closed, sealing us in together. I looked at Tyler's reflection in the polished steel doors. He was texting on his phone, probably telling his broker to get ready to sell. He had no idea that the document under his arm was going to bankrupt him. He had no idea that in 48 hours, when the creditors for Thorne Distressed Assets received the notification of his assumption of debt, his accounts would be frozen faster than ice on the lake. He thought he had taken my power. He had only taken my poison. I shuffled out of the building, blinking in the sunlight. I'm hungry, Beatrice, I mumbled. Can we go to the diner? Not today, Isaiah, she said coldly. We have a lot of work to do. Tyler needs to go over the account. Tyler patted the blue folder. Don't worry, Beatrice. I will handle everything. I am going to scrub the portfolio clean. I hid a smile behind my hand, pretending to cough. You do that, son, I thought. You scrub it, and when you are done, you are going to realize that the dirt is the only thing holding you up. I climbed into the back of their luxury SUV. I closed my eyes. Phase 1 was complete. They had the bait. Now I just had to wait for the hook to set. Tonight, Beatrice was going to meet Luther to pay him off. She thought she was tying up a loose end. She didn't know she was walking into a trap set by a man she thought was asleep in the back seat. I rested my head against the cool glass. The game was getting interesting, and I was just starting to enjoy myself. The rain was coming down in sheath, drumming against the roof of the unmarked van like 1,000 nervous fingers. I sat in the back, staring at the grainy black and white monitor. The screen showed the interior of room 104 at the Starlight Motel, a flea-bitten roadside dive on the edge of the city limit. It was the kind of place where people went to hide or to die. Darius sat in the front seat, checking his watch. She is late, he rumbled. She will be there, I said, my eyes fixed on the screen. She wants this done before the weekend. She wants a clean slate. On the monitor, Luther Banks paced the small room. He looked like a caged animal. He was wearing a cheap tracksuit, not the bespoke suits I had lent him. He kept checking the window, rubbing his hands together. He was terrified. He knew that tonight was payday, but he also knew enough about the world to know that loose ends usually get cut, not paid. At 10:15, a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. The headlights cut through the rain. Beatrice stepped out. She was wearing a trench coat and a scarf wrapped around her head, looking like a noir villainess. She carried a leather satchel. Here we go, Darius said, his hand hovering over the door handle. I watched Beatrice knock on the door. Luther opened it. She stepped inside, shaking the rain off her coat with a look of distaste. She scanned the room, her nose wrinkling at the smell of mildew and cheap tobacco. I turned up the volume on the receiver. You picked a lovely spot, Luther, Beatrice said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Very discreet. It's what you told me to do, Luther said, his voice shaking. Stay low. Don't be seen. And you did a wonderful job, she purred. She placed the satchel on the bed. The final payment. $50,000, just like we agreed. Luther reached for the bag, but Beatrice placed her hand over it. First, she said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a small silver flask, a toast to a successful partnership and to your new life in Thailand. She walked to the bathroom sink and grabbed 2 plastic cups. She poured amber liquid from the flask into both. I zoomed in on the screen. Her body blocked the camera angle for a split second, but I saw the motion of her thumb, a quick flick, a powder dropping into one of the cups. She turned around, smiling, holding both cups. She extended the one in her right hand to Luther. To freedom, she said. Luther hesitated. He looked at the money. He looked at the cup. He was a drunk, and the smell of the whiskey was calling. He licked his lip. To freedom, he echoed, reaching for the cup. Darius, I said. Now. Darius burst out of the van. I was right behind him, moving as fast as my legs would carry me. We crossed the wet asphalt in seconds. Inside the room, Beatrice watched Luther raise the cup to his lips. Her eyes were bright, predatory. She wasn't going to drink hers. She was waiting for him to take that first fatal swallow. Drink up, she encouraged softly. It's the good stuff. Luther tilted his head back. The cup touched his lip. Darius kicked the door. The wood splintered near the lock with a thunderous crack. The door swung open, slamming against the wall. Beatrice screamed, dropping her cup. Luther jumped, spilling the whiskey all over his chest. I stepped into the room. Beatrice froze. Her face went slack with shock. She looked from me to Luther, then back to me. For a second, her brain couldn't process it. She was seeing double. Two Isaiahs. One wet and terrified in a tracksuit, one dry and furious in a raincoat. "What?" she stammered. "Who?" "Hello, Beatrice," I said. My voice was calm, cold as the rain outside. Luther scrambled backward, falling onto the bed. "You said you wouldn't come. You said you'd wait. Plans changed," I said. I looked at the spilled liquid on the floor. It was fizzing slightly on the cheap carpet. "Darius, check the cup." Darius picked up the plastic cup Luther had dropped. He dipped a test strip into the remaining drops. It turned black instantly. "Cyanide," Darius said, looking at Beatrice. "Classic. Fast. Messy, though." Beatrice backed away, her hands trembling. I don't know who you are. This is a setup." "It is a setup," I agreed, "but not for me." I walked over to the satchel she had brought. I opened it and dumped the contents onto the bed. It wasn't money. It was cut newspaper. Stacks of it, with a single $100 bill on top of each bundle. Luther stared at the paper. A low keen escaped his throat. You were going to kill me for free?" Beatrice looked at the door, calculating her exit. But Darius was blocking it, a wall of muscle and menace. "You can't prove anything," she hissed, her mask of elegance finally slipping to reveal the rat underneath. "He's a junkie. Nobody will believe him." "They don't have to believe him," I said, pointing to the smoke detector on the ceiling. "They just have to believe the 4K video and audio recording that has been uploading to a secure cloud server for the last 10 minutes. Beatrice paled. She lunged for me, her nails aimed at my eyes. "You bastard, I'll ruin you. I'll tell everyone you're senile. I have the papers. Tyler signed them." Darius caught her arm mid-swing. He didn't hurt her. He just held her. "Let her go," I said. Darius looked at me, surprised. "Boss?" "Let her go," I repeated. Darius released her. Beatrice stumbled back, rubbing her wrist. She looked at me with pure hatred. "Why?" She spat. "Because the game isn't over," I said. "Go home, Beatrice. Tell Tyler everything went to plan. Tell him Luther is dealt with. Tell him the money is safe." "Why would I do that?" she sneered. "Because if you don't," I said, leaning in close, "I send this video to the police tonight, and you go to prison for attempted murder. But if you play along, if you continue with the plan to put me in the home, you might still have a chance to get away." I was lying, of course. She had no chance. But I needed her to believe she still had a move left. I needed them to commit all the way. I needed them to put me in that asylum so the trap would snap shut on their entire network, not just her. Beatrice looked at the camera, then at the door. She grabbed her purse. She didn't look at Luther. She ran. We heard her car peel out of the parking lot seconds later. Luther was sitting on the bed staring at the pile of newspaper. He was shaking violently. "She tried to kill me," he whispered. "Again." "She did," I said. "And she won't stop, unless we stop her." I reached under the bed and pulled out a metal briefcase I had brought with me. I set it on the mattress next to the worthless paper. I clicked the latches open. Inside were neat stacks of bills. Real one. $100,000. Luther's eyes widened. "This is yours," I said. "And this." I tossed a plane ticket on top of the money. "One way to Rio. First class, leaves in 48 hours. Luther reached for the money, but I slammed the case shut. "Not yet," I said. "There is a condition." "Anything," Luther said. "I'll do anything." "I need you to make a video," I said. "A confession. I want you to tell the camera everything. How she hired you, how she trained you, the surgery, the bank, the poison, everything." "Done," Luther said. "And," I continued, "I need you to play me one last time, but not for them, for me." "What do you mean?" "Tomorrow they are going to come for me," I said. "They are going to take me to the facility. I am going to let them. I am going to disappear." "Okay." "But on Saturday," I said, "Tyler is throwing a victory party. He thinks he's king of the world. I need a ghost to crash that party." I looked at Luther. He looked back, fear slowly being replaced by resolve. He looked at the money. He looked at the cyanide stain on the carpet. "You want me to walk in there?" Luther realized. "You want me to scare the hell out of them. I want you to make them believe they are seeing a dead man walking," I said. "Can you do that?" Luther stood up. He smoothed his tracksuit. He adjusted his posture. He shifted his weight to his right leg, letting the left one drag just slightly. He looked at me, and for a second it was like looking in a mirror. "Mr. Thorne," Luther said, his voice dropping into my cadence, "I can make them wet their pants." I smiled. "Good," I said. "Let's get the camera." We spent the next hour recording. Luther spilled everything, every dirty detail. When we were done, Darius took the memory card. "Get him to a safe house," I told Darius. "Don't let him out of your sight until Saturday night." I walked out into the rain. The air felt clean. I had one more stop before I went home to wait for the men in white coats. I had to say goodbye to my daughter. I had to give her one last chance to save her soul. I got into my truck. The city lights blurred in the rearview mirror. Beatrice thought she had escaped. She thought she had outsmarted me. She was driving home right now, rehearsing her lie to Tyler. "It's done. He's gone." She didn't know that the dead man was coming to dinner, and he was bringing the bill. The sun was just beginning to bleed through the heavy velvet curtains of my study, painting the mahogany desk in stripes of dust and gray light. I sat in the high-backed leather chair that I had bought 30 years ago when I closed my first $1 million deal. It was the throne from which I had ruled my kingdom, and today it would be the bench from which I passed my hardest sentence. I had texted Nia at 4 a.m. "Come over. I need to see my girl. Alone." I knew she would come. Guilt is a powerful alarm clock. I heard the front door open. I heard the soft click of heels on the hardwood. She was trying to be quiet, as if the house were a funeral home and I was already in the casket. "Daddy," she whispered, pushing the study door open. I turned my chair. I was not wearing the cardigan or the stained trousers today. I was wearing a clean white shirt and my reading glass. I wanted her to see me. I wanted her to see the man who raised her, not the caricature her husband had drawn. "Come in, Nia," I said. "Sit down." She sat in the guest chair, clutching her purse like a shield. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red-rimmed and her skin was pale. Living with a shark like Tyler Sterling drained the blood right out of you. "Where's Tyler?" I asked. "He is in the car," she said quickly. "He wanted to come in, but I told him I needed a minute. He is worried about you, Dad." "We all are." I looked at her. I looked for the little girl who used to sit on my lap while I reviewed Blueprint. I looked for the teenager who marched in the protests downtown because she believed in justice. I looked for the woman I thought I had raised to be strong, to be independent, to be a Thorne. All I saw was Mrs. Sterling. "Nia," I said, my voice soft but steady, "I want you to look at me. Really look at me." She lifted her eyes. They skittered away from mine, darting to the bookshelves, to the window, to her own hand. "I am looking, Daddy." "No, you aren't," I said. "You are looking at a problem. You are looking at an obligation. I want you to look at your father." She locked eyes with me then. I held her gaze. I did not blink. I did not let my mouth hang open. I did not let my hand shake. I projected every ounce of clarity and intelligence I possessed. "I am going to ask you a question, Nia," I said, "and the answer is going to determine the rest of your life. Do not think about what Tyler told you. Do not think about what the doctor said. Use your own eyes. Use your own heart." I leaned forward. "Do you really think I am crazy, Nia? Do you really believe I have lost my mind?" The room went silent. The dust motes danced in the light. This was it, the final test. If she said no, if she admitted that this whole thing felt wrong, if she showed even a spark of the loyalty I had poured into her, she was safe. I would save her. I would take her with me when I burned Tyler's world to the ground. Nia opened her mouth. Her chin trembled. I saw a flash of doubt. I saw the daughter I loved fighting surface. She knew. Deep down, she knew. She knew I didn't wander. She knew I didn't forget names. She knew her husband was a liar. But then her phone buzzed in her purse. It was a short, sharp vibration. Her eyes shifted. The doubt vanished, replaced by fear. Fear of him. Fear of the fight. Fear of the difficult truth versus the easy lie. She lowered her head. She looked at her knees. "Daddy," she whispered. You called us. You forgot where Mom. You signed the papers with an X. That was a performance, Nia." I said, harshness creeping into my tone. "And you know it. Look at me now. Do I look confused?" She squeezed her eyes shut. Tears leaked out. "Tyler says it comes and goes," she recited. "He says you have good days and bad days. He says it is safer this way. The facility, they can help you. They can keep you safe. Tyler says, Tyler says, Tyler says." She didn't have a voice of her own anymore. She was just an echo chamber for his greed. "Nia, listen to me," I said. "If you let them take me today, you are crossing a line you can never come back from. You are participating in a crime. Tyler doesn't want to help me. He wants to sell the Georgia land. He wants to liquidate the company. He is trying to save the company." She snapped her head, snapping up. Her defense of him was automatic robotic. He told me the accounts are a mess. He told me you were losing money. He is trying to fix what you broke, Daddy." "I broke nothing," I roared, slamming my hand on the desk. "I built this. I built the roof over your head. I built the trust fund that paid for your wedding. And now you sit there and tell me that a man who can't even balance his own checkbook is fixing my empire?" She flinched, shrinking back into the chair. "Stop it," she sobbed. "Stop yelling. This is the aggression Dr. Vance talked about. You are paranoid. You are hostile." I sat back. The fire in my chest turned into cold ash. There it was. The choice had been made. She wasn't just weak. She was complicit. She had accepted their narrative because it was easier than facing the fact that she had married a monster. She would rather believe her father was mad than admit her husband was evil. I looked at her and I realized I was looking at a stranger with my eyes and my nose but none of my soul. "Get out," said. Nia blinked, wiping her face. "What?" I said. "Get out. Go back to your husband. Go back to your car. Tell him I am ready. Tell him to bring the van." "Daddy, please." "I am not your daddy anymore," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "I am a patient. I am a liability. I am a problem to be solved, so go solve it. Leave." She stood up shaking. She looked at me one last time, waiting for me to soften, waiting for me to tell her it was okay. I turned my chair toward the window. I looked out at the garden I had planted for her mother 20 years ago. "Go," I repeated. I heard her sob. I heard her run out of the room. I heard the front door slam. I watched through the window as she ran to the black Range Rover parked at the curb. Tyler got out. He hugged her. He looked at the house and smiled. He whispered something in her ear, and she nodded, wiping her eye. They drove away. I sat there for a long time. The silence in the house was heavy. It was the silence of a tomb. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I pulled out a hidden key taped to the underside. I used it to open the locked compartment in the floor of the closet. I pulled out a thick leather binder, my last will and testament. I placed it on the desk. I picked up a red pen. I flipped to the section marked beneficiary. "To my beloved daughter Nia Sterling, I leave the entirety of my estate, including the real estate holdings, the stock portfolio, and the contents of the trust provided she..." I took the pen. I did not hesitate. My hand was steady. My heart was dead. I drew a thick red line through her name. I slashed through the paragraph. I crossed out the trust. I crossed out the house. I crossed out the legacy. I turned to the next page. "In the event of my incapacitation or death," I wrote in the margins in clear block letters, "I hereby hereby revoke all previous bequests to Nia Sterling. She is to receive nothing, not one dime, not one brick, not one memory. She has chosen her family, and it is not this one. I signed my name at the bottom, Isaiah Thorne. I closed the binder. I felt lighter. The grief was gone, replaced by a clarity that was sharp enough to cut glass. They wanted my money. They wanted my power. They wanted to strip me naked and leave me to rot in a white room. Nia had helped them hold the knife. I put the binder back in the floor safe. I locked. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I practiced my vacant stare. I let my shoulder slump. I let my jaw go slack. The van was coming at noon. The men in white coats were coming to take the crazy old man away. I was ready for them. I was going to let them take me. I was going to let them lock the door. I was going to let them think they had buried me alive. Because you can't haunt a house if you are still living in it. You have to leave first. You have to become a ghost. And when I came back, I wouldn't be a father. I wouldn't be a husband. I would be the judgment of God. I checked my watch. 2 hours. I went to the kitchen to make a sandwich. I was going to need my strength. It is hard work destroying your own family, but someone had to do it. The van that came for me was not an ambulance. It was a sleek, unmarking white transport vehicle with tinted windows that looked more like a hearse for the living than a vessel of mercy. It idled in my driveway, the engine purring with a low, menacing rumble that vibrated through the floorboards of my living room. I sat in my chair, clutching a throw pillow like a lifeline staring at the door. I was ready. I had spent the last 2 hours practicing my tremors, practicing the vacant stare of a man whose mind had turned to mush. Tyler opened the front door without knocking. He walked in with the stride of a landlord coming to evict a squatter. Behind him were 2 men in blue scrub. They were not doctored. They were muscle. They were the kind of men you hire when you want a problem removed quietly and efficiently. They were thick-necked, dead-eyed, and carrying a canvas restraint bag just in case the patient got feisty. "There he is," Tyler said, pointing at me like I was a piece of luggage. "He has been agitated all morning. Dr. Vance signed the commitment order. We need to get him to the sanctuary before he hurts himself." Beatrice stood by the window, her back to me. She could not watch, not because she had a conscience, but because she was already mentally redecorating the room. She was erasing me while I was still breathing. One of the orderlies stepped forward. Mr. Thorne, his voice was flat, rehearsed. "We are here to take you to a nice place where you can rest. Please stand up, sir." I looked at him. I let my lower lip tremble. I looked at Tyler. Who are these men?" "Tyler," I stammered, my voice pitching up into a whine. "Are we going fishing?" Tyler sighed, a sound of exaggerated exhaustion for the benefit of the orderly. "No, Dad, no fishing. We are going to see the doctor. They are going to fix your head." I shrank back into the chair, gripping the armrest. "I don't want to go," I whispered. "I want to stay here. This is my house. It is not your house any." "Old man," Tyler muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. "It is a piggy bank, and I am about to smash it open." He nodded to the orderly. "Grab him." They moved in. Big hands clamped onto my arm. They were strong. They lifted me out of the chair as if I weighed nothing. I struggled just enough to sell the performance. I flailed my arms weakly. I shouted for Beatrice. "Honey, help me," I cried. "Don't let them take me." Beatrice turned around. She wore sunglasses indoors to hide eyes that I knew were dry. "It is for the best, Isaiah," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "Just go. Stop making a scene." They dragged me to the door. I dragged my feet. I let my left leg go dead limp, forcing them to carry my weight. I wanted them to feel the burden of me. I wanted them to sweat. As we crossed the threshold, I looked back. I saw Tyler standing in the center of my foyer. He was surveying the high ceilings, the art on the walls, the grand staircase. He looked like a king who had just conquered a castle. He smiled at me, a cold, victorious smirk that said I won. He thought the game was over. He didn't know he had just locked himself in a cage with a tiger and thrown away the key. They loaded me into the back of the van. The interior smelled of antiseptic and stale fear. There were no windows in the passenger compartment, just metal walls and a single bench with strap. They buckled me in. "Sit tight, Grandpa," one of the orderlies said. "It is a long ride." The door slammed shut, plunging me into darkness. I did not panic. Sat in the dark, and I breathed. I let the mask fall. My face relaxed. The trembling stopped. I closed my eyes and visualized the map of the city. We were heading north. The sanctuary was an exclusive facility in Lake Forest. It cost $20,000 a month. It was a warehouse for the inconvenient elderly relatives of the 1%. It was a place where rich people paid to have their guilt washed and fed 3 times a day. It was also a fortress. High walls, security gates, no visitors without approval. Perfect. It was the perfect alibi. How could Isaiah Thorne destroy his son-in-law's life when he was locked in a padded room 40 miles away under 24-hour observation? The ride took an hour. When the doors opened, the light blinded me. I was pulled out into a receiving bay. The air was crisp and smelled of pine needle. The facility looked like a country club. Manicured lawns, fountains, a grand entrance with pillars, but I saw the cameras. I saw the high fences hidden behind the hedges. I saw the electronic locks on every door. A nurse was waiting with a wheelchair. She had a clipboard and a smile that looked like it had been stapled onto her face. "Welcome, Mr. Thorne," she chirped. "We have a lovely room ready for you." I slumped into the wheelchair. I let my head loll to the side. I drooled a little. "Process him quickly," Tyler said, appearing behind me. He drove his own car following the van. He wanted to make sure the package was delivered. "I have a meeting in the city. I need the intake form signed now." We were taken to an office. I sat there while Tyler signed my freedom away. He signed the admission paper. He signed the consent for medication. He signed the order restricting visitors. "No phone calls," the nurse noted, checking a box. "No unsupervised outing." "Exactly," Tyler said. "He gets confused. He calls people. He makes up stories." Total isolation Circulation for the first week. Doctor's orders. He handed the clipboard back. He looked at me one last time. He didn't say goodbye. He just checked his watch, turned on his heel, and walked out. He walked with a bounce in his step. He was going back to my house to open my safe. He was going back to sell my land. Good luck with that, Tyler, I thought. The nurse wheeled me to my room. It was on the 3rd floor. Room 312. It was clean, white, and sterile. There was a bed, a chair, and a window that only opened 2 inches. All right, Mr. Thorne, he said efficiently. Let's get you comfortable. We need to inventory your personal effect. This was the dangerous part. The strip search. She took my jacket. She took my wallet. She took my watch. She took my belt. Okay, shoes off, she said. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. I have bad feet, I mumbled, clutching my shoes. Orthopedic. The doctor said I must wear them. My arches. They collapsed. I looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. I channeled every ounce of pitiable old man energy I had. Please, miss, I whispered. They hurt so much without them. She hesitated. She looked at my old scuffed leather loafers. They looked harmless. They looked like old man shoes. She sighed. She was tired. It was the end of her shift. She didn't want to fight a senile patient over footwear. Fine, she said. You can keep them for now, but if you try to kick anyone, thank you, I said. Thank you, Aunt. She left, closing the heavy door. I heard the electronic lock engage with a solid thud. I was alone. I waited 5 minutes. I listened. The hallway was quiet. I stood up. I walked to the door and listened again. Nothing. I walked to the window and looked out. The sun was setting over the manicured ground. Somewhere out there in the city, Tyler was popping champagne. I sat on the bed. I took off my right shoe. It was a custom-made loafer Italian leather with a reinforced sole. I had paid a cobbler in Little Italy $5,000 to modify it 2 years ago. I gripped the heel and twisted it to the left. There was a faint click. The heel slid open, revealing a hollow compartment. Inside, nestled in foam, was a device no larger than a pack of gum. It was a satellite phone, military-grade, encrypted, untraceable. It didn't rely on cell tower. It beamed a signal straight to the sky. I pressed the power button. A tiny green light blinked. I had a signal. I dialed Henderson first. He answered on the first ring. I am in, I said, keeping my voice low. Isaiah Henderson breathed. Are you okay? I am in the luxury gulag, I said. Tyler just left. He signed the admission papers, which means he legally affirmed guardianship. And the trap? The trap is set, I said. Did he access the account? 10 minutes ago. Henderson said, his voice grim but satisfied. He used the digital key from the power of attorney you gave him. He logged into the main business account. He transferred $4 million to a holding company in the Cayman. I smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile. Good, I said. He just committed wire fraud, bank fraud, and international money laundering. And since he signed the confession of judgment instead of the power of attorney, he didn't transfer my money. He transferred debt. He just moved $4 million of toxic loans into his own name. He doesn't know yet, Henderson said. The system shows the transfer is pending. It will clear in 24 hours. Perfect, I said. Let him sleep on. Let him think he is rich for one more night. What about the land? Darius called, Henderson said. Tyler contacted the Atlanta developers an hour ago. He sent them the deed, or what he thinks is the deed. And they are moving fast, Henderson said. They want to close by Friday. I leaned back against the pillow. This was better than I had hoped. Tyler was moving with the reckless speed of an amateur. He was so drunk on power he wasn't checking the brake. I hung up with Henderson. I dialed Darius. Is Luther ready? I asked. He is shaking like a leaf, but he is ready, Darius said. He has the script. He has the suit. He knows the line. Get him to the party on Saturday, I said. And Darius? Yeah, boss? Make sure the cameras are rolling. I want to see Tyler's face when the dead man walks in the door. I will get the popcorn, Darius said. I hung up. I slid the phone back into the heel of my shoe and clicked it shut. I put the shoe back on. I walked to the mirror in the small bathroom. I looked at myself. I saw the gray hair. I saw the wrinkle. I saw the tired eyes of a man who had been betrayed by everyone he loved. But beneath that, I saw the shark. I was locked in a room with no way out. I had no money in my pocket. I had no friends in the building. But I was the most dangerous man in the world because I was the man who held the detonator. I lay down on the bed. I pulled the thin blanket up to my chin. Sleep well, Tyler, I whispered to the empty room. Enjoy the champagne. Enjoy the big house. Because when you wake up, the roof is going to be on fire. And I am going to be the one holding the matches. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in days, I slept. I slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a man who knows he has already won the war. I sat on the edge of the narrow hospital bed in the semi-darkness of room 312, watching my life being dismantled on a 4-inch screen. The device hidden in the heel of my shoe was now in my hand, connected to the security cameras inside my own home. I had installed them years ago, not to spy on intruders, but to protect my legacy. Tonight, they were broadcasting the funeral of that legacy, hosted by the very people who had murdered it. It was Saturday night. The air in the facility was stale, recycled, and smelled of industrial cleaner, but on the screen, the air in my mansion looked golden and expensive. Tyler had not wasted any time. He hadn't even waited for the ink to dry on the admission papers before sending out the invitation. He called it a celebration of life, a transition party. I called it what it was, a victory lap. The camera feed from the grand ballroom was high definition. I could see the sweat on the waiters' brows as they navigated the sea of bodies. I could see the bubbles in the champagne flute. But what I noticed most was the crowd. These were not my friends. These were not the men and women who had stood shoulder to shoulder with me during the riots, who had rebuilt the South Side when the banks redlined us us, who had fought for civil rights with bricks and mortar. No, this was Tyler's crowd. It was a sea of navy blue blazers and cocktail dresses that cost more than the average family makes in a year. It was the country club set, the hedge fund manager, the real estate sharks who saw Chicago not as a home, but as a portfolio. They stood on my hardwood floors drinking my vintage wine and laughing with the easy confidence of people who have never had to fight for a seat at the table. I watched Beatrice circulating through the room. She was wearing a black dress, modest, but cut to show off the diamond necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary. She played the part of the devoted, burdened wife to perfection. I zoomed in. I could see her accept a glass of wine from a man I recognized as a rival developer from the north side. She touched his arm lightly. She nodded as he whispered something in her ear. She threw her head back and laughed. It was a sound I hadn't heard in years. It was the sound of a woman who had finally cleared the obstacle in her path. But the star of the show was Tyler. My son-in-law stood in the center of the room holding court. He looked taller tonight. He stood with his chest puffed out, occupying space that wasn't his. He was telling a story, gesturing wildly with a crystal tumbler of my best scotch. People were leaning in, listening raptly. He was the man of the hour, the heir apparent, the genius who had taken the reins from the senile old man. I switched camera feed. I checked the library. Empty. I checked the master bedroom. Empty. But the safe was open. I could see it in the corner of the frame. The door was ajar. It looked like a violated mouth. He had already been in there. He had taken the deeds. He had taken the bearer bond. He had stripped the carcass clean before the heart had even stopped beating. I switched back to the ballroom. The music lowered. A jazz trio I had hired for my own birthday parties playing soft background music, but they stopped abruptly as Tyler tapped a spoon against glass. The sharp ringing sound cut through the chatter. The room went silent. Tyler stepped up onto the small riser I used for Christmas speeches. He adjusted his tie. He looked out at the crowd with a smug proprietary gaze. He looked at the high ceilings, the chandeliers, the oil paintings of my ancestors. He didn't see history. He saw equity. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. Tyler began, his voice booming with false humility. It has been a difficult week for the family. As many of you know, Isaiah has been struggling with his health for some time. It was a hard decision, but Beatrice and I finally had to do what was best for him. He is now resting comfortably in a facility where he can get the 24-hour care he desperately needs. A murmur of sympathetic noises rippled through the crowd. Poor Isaiah, so sad, such a tragedy. They didn't care. They were just waiting for the punchline. Tyler took a sip of scotch. He let the silence hang for a moment, building the drama. But Tyler continued, his voice hardening, shifting from family concern to business ambition. Life must go on, and business must go on. Isaiah was a pioneer. He built this company from nothing. He fought hard, but let's be honest, he was a man of a different time. He was tired. He was holding on to the past. He was sentimental about bricks and mortar when the world has moved on to leverage and liquidity. My hand tightened around the phone. Tired, sentimental. He was talking about a man who was currently plotting his destruction from a locked room 40 miles away. I have spent the last 48 hours reviewing the portfolio, Tyler said, his eyes gleaming. And I have to tell you, it is a diamond in the rough, but it needs polishing. It needs new vision. That is why tonight I am proud to announce the restructuring of Thorne Development. He paused for effect. Beatrice stood by his side, gazing up at him with adoration. She was looking at the money, not the man. We are going to trim the fat, Tyler declared. For decades, Isaiah held onto properties in Bronzeville and the South Side out of a sense of nostalgia, low-income housing. Community centers, historic landmarks, assets that bleed money, assets that occupy prime real estate but generate zero return. I felt a cold fire in my gut. Those weren't assets that bled money. Those were homes. Those were the places where I grew up. Those were the community centers that kept kids off the street. I subsidized them. I paid for the repairs out of my own pocket because I believed that if you make it out, you have a responsibility to reach back. Tyler didn't understand responsibility. He only understood profit. Starting Monday, Tyler announced, raising his voice, we are liquidating the legacy holding. We have already entered into agreements with developers to rezone the Bronzeville blocks. Those old crumbling brownstones are coming down. And in their place, we are going to build the future. Luxury mixed-use condominiums, high-end retail. We are bringing the Gold Coast to the South Side. Applause broke out. Polite, enthusiastic applause. These people didn't see families being evicted. They saw gentrification. They saw property values rising. They saw a neighborhood being cleansed of its history to make way for glass boxes and coffee shops. And Tyler continued shouting over the applause, that is just the beginning. We are also divesting the rural holding, the land in Georgia. It has sat fallow for a century, just dirt and tree. Well, we found a partner who sees the potential. Amazon Logistics, data center. We are turning dirt into digital gold. My grandfather's land, the land where my ancestors worked as slaves and then bought as free men. He was going to pave it. He was going to pour concrete over the soil that held my family's blood. To the new era, Tyler shouted, raising his glass high. To Sterling and Thorne, a modern company for a modern world. To the new era, the crowd echoed. Beatrice clinked her glass against his. They smiled. They looked like the kings of the world. They thought the old lion was toothless. They thought the roar was gone. I sat in the dark room. I looked at my hand. They were steady. Tyler Sterling had just publicly announced his intent to destroy a community. He had just confessed to his friends that he was dismantling my life's work. He thought he was giving a victory speech. He didn't know he was giving a confession. And he certainly didn't know that the man standing at the back of the room, the man who had just slipped in through the service entrance, wasn't a waiter. I watched on the screen as the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom slowly opened. The crowd didn't notice. They were too busy toasting Tyler. They were too busy laughing at the tired pioneer. But I saw him. He was wearing my charcoal suit, the one the imposter had worn to the bank. He had his hair trimmed silver. He walked with a heavy drag in his left leg. He stood in the shadows leaning on a cane I didn't need but Luther required for the role. Luther Bank. My doppelganger. My goat. He looked terrified. I could see the sheen of sweat on his forehead even on the small screen. He knew that if he messed this up, he was dead. He knew that Beatrice had tried to poison. He knew that I was the only thing standing between him and a shallow grave. But fear is a powerful director. Tyler was still on the riser, basking in the adulation. Isaiah was a great man. Tyler said, his voice thick with false reverence. But every king must eventually step down. Every sun must set. I pressed the button on my phone, not to call Luther, but to switch the audio feed to the hidden speakers I had installed in the ballroom years ago. I couldn't speak through them, but I could hear everything crystal clear. I watched Luther step out of the shadow. He moved into the light. The first person to see him was Mrs. Higgins, the wife of a banker. She dropped her wine glass. It shattered. The sound cut through the room. Heads turned. Tyler looked annoyed. He looked down from his perch to see who had interrupted his moment. His eyes landed on the back of the room. His smile froze. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a curtain fall. The glass in his hand tilted, spilling 20-year-old scotch onto his shoe. Beatrice saw him a second later. She gasped a sound that was amplified by the sudden silence of the room. Her hand flew to her throat, clutching the diamond. Luther stood there. He didn't speak. He just looked at them. He looked at them with my eyes. He looked at them with the face of the man they had drugged, declared insane, and locked away. The crowd parted. They backed away from him as if he were contagious. A murmur started low and terrified. Isaiah? Someone whispered. I thought he was... Tyler stammered. He stepped back, nearly falling off the rise. Dad? But you are... Luther took a step forward. Drag. Step. Drag. Step. The rhythm was perfect. It was the sound of judgment approaching. He raised his cane and pointed it straight at Tyler's chest. You thought I was tired? Luther boomed his voice, finding the deep resonance I had coached him on. You thought I was done? Beatrice screamed. It wasn't a scream of surprise. It was a scream of a woman seeing a dead man walking. She had watched him drink the poison. She had seen the cup touch his lips. He is not real, she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger. He is a ghost. He is hallucinating. Tyler recovered first. He was desperate. He was watching his victory dissolve. Security! Tyler yelled, his voice cracking. Get him out of here. He escaped. He is a mental patient. He is dangerous. Luther laughed. It was my laugh. Dry, hard. I am not the one who is dangerous. Tyler, Luther said, walking closer, the crowd melting away from him. I am just a pioneer, and I am here to take back my land. I watched from my cell. I leaned back against the pillow. The party was over. The nightmare was just beginning. Now it was my turn. I stood up. I put my shoe back on. I adjusted my collar. It was time to make a phone call. It was time to bring in the cavalry, because a ghost is scary, but the FBI, that is terrifying. The heavy oak doors of the ballroom groaned open, revealing the man standing in the threshold. The silence that had fallen over the room was absolute, a vacuum where all the air had been sucked out by the sheer impossibility of what the guests were seeing. Luther Bank stood there, illuminated by the hallway lights, casting a long shadow that stretched across the polished floorboards all the way to the riser where Tyler and Beatrice stood frozen. I watched from my cell, my thumb hovering over the control button on the remote app. I could see the sweat glistening on Luther's forehead. He was terrified. He was walking into a den of lions, armed only with a script I had written for him. But he was doing it. He stepped into the room. Step, drag, step, drag. The rhythm of my walk, the cadence of my pain echoed through the silent ballroom. Beatrice was the first to break. Her hands flew to her mouth, stifling a scream that clawed its way out anyway. She stumbled back, her high heels catching on the edge of the rise. To her, this was not just her husband returning to ruin her party. This was a dead man walking. She had watched him drink the poison. She had seen the cup touch his lip. In her mind, she had already buried. He escaped. She shrieked, her voice cracking into a hysteria that cut through the room like shattered glass. Call the police. He escaped the facility. He is dangerous. He is violent. Get him out of here. The crowd rippled with panic. Men in expensive suits stepped in front of their wives. Waiters dropped trays. The security guards Tyler had hired moved forward, hands reaching for batons, uncertain of what to do with the man who owned the building. Luther did not flinch. He did not run. He raised his cane slowly, deliberately, and pointed it straight at Beatrice. I did not escape from anywhere, Mrs. Thorne, Luther said, his voice booming with the deep, gravelly timbre I had coached him to use. And I am not Isaiah Thorne. The murmur in the room turned into a roar of confusion. People looked from Luther to the large portrait of me hanging above the fireplace, then back to Luther. The resemblance was uncanny. It was perfect. What is he talking about? Someone whispered near the camera microphone. Is he having an episode? Luther took another step forward into the pool of light from the chandelier. He looked at the crowd, then he looked directly at Beatrice. I am the man you hired, he said clearly. I am the man you paid $50,000 to undergo plastic surgery. I am the man you trained to walk like your husband. I am the man you sent into the First National Bank to steal $500,000 because your husband's security security measures were too good for you to crack on your own. Beatrice turned pale. She looked like she was going to faint. She looked at Tyler, desperate for him to fix this, to make the ghost go away. Liar, she screamed, pointing a shaking finger. He is lying. It is the dementia. He doesn't know who he is. He thinks he is an actor. Please, someone help him. Tyler stepped forward. He regained his composure fast. He was a creature of Wall Street, used to bluffs and high-stakes lies. He saw an opening. If Luther admitted he wasn't me, then Tyler could spin it. He laughed. It was a loud, incredulous laugh that forced the room to relax slightly. He shook his head, looking at the crowd with a wide, pitying smile. Ladies and gentlemen, please, Tyler said, holding up his hands. I apologize for this. This is heartbreaking, really. My father-in-law's condition is worse than we thought. He has hired an actor. He has staged a performance. Tyler walked to the edge of the riser, looking down at Luther with sneering contempt. Look at him, Tyler said, gesturing to Luther. This is what paranoia looks like, folk. Isaiah is so sick he thinks there is a conspiracy. He thinks we hired a double. He has probably paid this poor man to come here and recite these lines. It is tragic. It is the final act of a mind that has lost its tether to reality. The crowd nodded. It made sense. It was a logical explanation for an insane situation. Poor Isaiah. He hired a lookalike. He is staging a play. Tyler turned to the security guards, his voice hardening. Escort this man out and call the facility. Tell them their patient has wandered. Tell them he is delusional and needs immediate sedation. The guards moved in. They grabbed Luther by the arms. Luther struggled, his eyes wide with fear. He looked at the camera hidden in the molding. He looked for me. Wait, Luther shouted. She tried to kill me. She poisoned me. Tyler laughed again, louder this time, drowning him out. Poison, of course. And I suppose I am a lizard person too? Get him out of here. This party is for the future, not for ghost story. I watched Tyler's face. He was glowing. He thought he had won. He thought he had turned my ace into a joker. He thought he was the smartest man in the room. It was time. I pressed the button on my phone. The lights in the ballroom dimmed instantly, plunging the room into semi-darkness. The music cut out. The hum of conversation died. At the front of the room behind the riser where Tyler and Beatrice stood there was a massive projection screen. It had been displaying a slideshow of the new architectural plans for the Southside development. Glass towers, luxury condos, the erasure of my legacy. The screen went black, then static flickered across it. A new video appeared. It was grainy, black and white footage. The timestamp in the corner read, yesterday, 10:15 p.m. The room was small and dirty. A motel room. Beatrice was on the screen. She was standing there in high definition, 10 feet tall, looming over the ballroom. She was wearing her trench coat. She was holding a silver flask. The audio crackled through the high-end speakers of the ballroom, crystal clear. To freedom, the Beatrice on the screen said. Her voice was unmistakable. It was the same voice that had just screamed for the police. On the screen, she poured 2 cups. She turned her back to the camera. Her thumb flicked. A powder fell into the cup. A collective gasp went through the room. It sounded like all the oxygen being sucked out at once. Tyler turned around slowly. He looked up at the screen. His smile vanished. On the video, Beatrice handed the cup to Luther. Drink up, she said. It is the good stuff. I paused the video right there. The image froze on Beatrice's face. She was smiling, a tight, predatory smile, waiting for the man to die. I picked up the microphone connected to the system. I was sitting in my cell 40 miles away, but my voice was about to fill that room like the voice of God. Is that an actor, Tyler? I asked. My voice boomed through the ballroom. It was deep calm and terrifying. Tyler spun around, looking for the source of the sound. Who said that? Who is doing this? Is that a delusion, Beatrice? I continued. Or is that you trying to murder the man you hired to replace me? Beatrice collapsed. She didn't faint. Her legs just gave out. She fell to her knees on the riser, staring up at her own crime, projected for all her friends to see. You thought I was senile, my voice echoed. You thought I was weak. You thought you could lock me away and steal the land my grandfather bled for. The video shifted. It showed a new document, the confession of judgment that Tyler had signed in the lawyer's office. The camera zoomed in on his signature. You didn't sign a power of attorney, Tyler, I said. You signed a debt assumption. You just personally guaranteed $40 million in toxic assets. You are not rich, son. You are bankrupt. Tyler stared at the screen. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. He looked at the document. He recognized. He saw the trap closing around his neck. Turn it off, Tyler screamed, lunging for the cables near the projector. Turn it off. It is fake. It is a deep fake. He tore the cables out of the wall. The screen went black, but it was too late. The image was burned into everyone's retina. The lights came back on, full brightness, harsh and unforgiving. The doors at the back of the room opened again. This time, it wasn't a ghost. It was the FBI. 6 agents in windbreakers moved into the room with the precision of a hammer strike. They didn't look at the guests. They didn't look at the champagne. They looked at the rock. Beatrice was sobbing on the floor. Tyler was standing there, holding the severed cables, panting like a trapped animal. Luther shook off the security guard. He straightened his jacket. He smoothed his hair. He looked at Tyler and smiled. That is a wrap, Luther said. I set the phone down on the bed in my cell. I took a deep breath. My hands were still steady. The nurse unlocked my door. She looked confused. Mr. Thorne, she said, there is a car waiting for you outside. A federal agent. He says you are being released into protective custody. I stood up. I put on my jacket. I picked up my old loafers. I am not being released, I said. I am checking out. I walked out of the room. I did not limp. I walked down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past the security desk. I walked out into the night air. The war was over. The kingdom was saved. But as I looked at the stars, I knew that the hardest part was still to come. I had destroyed my enemy, but I had also destroyed my family. And standing in the wreckage of a victory that tasted like ash, I realized that being right is a very lonely place to be. The silence that followed the arrival of the federal agents was heavy enough to crush a man, but I was not there to be crushed. I was there to be the hammer. The service doors at the back of the ballroom did not creak this time. They flew open with the force of a judgment passed down from on high. I stepped across the threshold, and for the first time in weeks, I did not drag my left leg. I did not hunch my shoulder. I did not tremble. I stood at my full height of 6 feet 2 inches, wearing the navy pinstripe suit I had bought the day I acquired the Chicago waterfront contract 30 years ago. It was a suit made of armor and history. In my right hand, I held my cane, but I did not lean on it. I carried it like a scepter. To my left walked Henderson, the bank manager who had watched the robbery unfold with me. To my right walked Special Agent Miller, the regional director of the FBI, a man I had known since he was a beat cop in Bronzeville. We moved as a phalanx, a wall of consequence, moving toward the riser where my family stood amidst the ruins of their celebration. The crowd parted for us. These people, the elite of the city, the captains of industry who had spent the last hour drinking my scotch and laughing at my demise, now shrank back. They pressed themselves against the walls, desperate to distance themselves from the blast zone. I saw fear in their eyes, real primal fear. They were looking at a man they thought was locked in a padded room, drooling on himself, and instead they saw the shark that had swum in these waters before most of them were born. I walked down the center aisle, my eyes locked on Tyler Sterling. He was standing near the projector screen, holding the severed cables in his hands like a lifeline that had been cut. His face was a mask of pale sweat and disbelief. He looked from Luther, who was still standing defiantly on the floor, to me. His brain was trying to process two Isaiah Thorne. One was a hired actor who had just exposed the plot. The other was the architect of his destruction. I stopped at the base of the riser. I let the silence stretch. I let him feel the weight of my gaze. Is this another trick? Tyler stammered, his voice cracking high and thin. Is this another actor? Beatrice, get up, look at this. It is a parade of ghosts. Beatrice lifted her head from the floor. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black rivulets. She looked at me. She knew. A wife knows her husband, no matter how many lies sit between them. She saw the set of my jaw. She saw the cold fire in my eyes. She let out a low, keen, and buried her face in her hands again. I stepped onto the riser. My shoes clicked sharply on the wood. I stood toe-to-toe with my son-in-law. Up close, he smelled of fear, an expensive cologne that had turned sour on his skin. You think I am a trick, Tyler? I asked, my voice low and steady, amplified by the acoustics of the silent room. You think I am a performance? I signed the papers, he babbled, backing away until he hit the podium. I have the power of attorney. I put you in the home. I saw you. You were confused. You didn't know your own name. I didn't know my name because I was busy writing yours on a tombstone, I said. I took a step closer, invading his personal space, forcing him to look up at me. You looked at my gray hair and you saw weakness. You looked at my limp and you saw an opportunity. You looked at my skin and you saw a stepping stone to your own legitimacy. You thought because you went to Ivy League schools and work in a glass tower that you are smarter than a black man from the South Side who started with a shovel and a bag of cement. I leaned in. You think I am old boy? I built this city when your father was still nursing. I was negotiating with union bosses and dodging Molotov cocktails while you were learning to tie your boat shoes. You didn't steal my empire, Tyler. You just volunteered to carry my trash. Tyler's eyes darted around the room, looking for an ally, looking for a lawyer, looking for a way out. This is illegal, he shouted, pointing at Agent Miller. You can't just barge in here. I have right. I am the legal guardian of this estate. I have the document. I signed it yesterday. Ah, yes, the document. I signaled to Henderson. He stepped forward, opening a leather portfolio. He pulled out the blue folder, the one I had swapped in the conference room. He held it up for the room to see. You mean this document, Tyler? I asked. That is it, Tyler said, clinging to the hope that the paper shield would save him. The power of attorney. It gives me full control. It gives me the asset. It gives me the land. I took the folder from Henderson. I opened it to the signature page. I traced Tyler's arrogant, sprawling signature with my finger. You didn't read it, did you? I asked softly. You were so arrogant, so sure of your victory, that you didn't read a single line of text above your name. I read it. He lied, sweat dripping from his nose. It was standard. Arthur drafted it. Arthur drafted the one you put on the table, I said. But that is not the one you signed. I swapped them, Tyler. While you were looking for my pen on the floor, I changed the future. I turned the document around so he could read the header. The bold black letters seemed to pulse under the ballroom light. Confession of judgment and assumption of personal liability. Tyler squinted. He blinked. He read the words, but his mind refused to accept them. What does that mean? He whispered. It means you are not the guardian of my asset. I explained, my voice hard as granite. It means you are the guarantor of my debt, specifically the debts of a holding company called Thorne Distressed Asset. I motioned to the screen behind us. Agent Miller nodded to a technician who had reconnected the feed. A spreadsheet appeared on the massive wall. It was a sea of red numbers. You see, Tyler, I continued for years. I have used that shell company to hold hold the most toxic radioactive assets in my portfolio, failed ventures, buildings with structural condemnation, and most importantly, a massive outstanding tax lien from a dispute in 1999 that I have been fighting for 2 decades. I pointed to the bottom line of the spreadsheet, $50 million. I said, that is the current debt load of the company, including penalties, interest, and EPA fines for asbestos removal in the old warehouses you were so eager to sell. Tyler shook his head violently. No, that is not possible. You have money. You are rich. I have money, I agreed. My personal wealth is secure. My trust is locked. But this company, this specific entity, it is a black hole. And by signing this document as the primary guarantor, you just voluntarily transferred that entire debt load onto your personal credit. I let the words sink in. I watched the realization crash over him like a tidal. You didn't assume control of my fortune, son. You assumed responsibility for my mistake. You personally guaranteed $50 million in debt. And since this is a confession of judgment, you waived your right to a trial. You waived your right to appeal. The creditors can seize your assets immediately. Tyler looked at his hand. He looked at the Rolex on his wrist. He looked at the expensive suit he was wearing. He realized in that moment that he didn't own any of it. And this is fraud, he screamed, his voice breaking into a sob. You tricked me. You can't do this. It is not fraud if you sign it voluntarily, I said, cold and merciful. You wanted to be the big man. You wanted to sign the paper. You wanted to take the burden off the old man's shoulder. Well, congratulations, Tyler. The burden is all yours. I turned to the crowd. The guests were silent, staring at us with a mixture of horror and awe. They were watching a public execution. And just so we are clear, I announced, my voice booming. The land in Georgia, the ancestral land he promised to sell to Amazon, it is not in that holding company. That land was placed in a non-profit conservation trust 5 years ago. It can never be sold. It can never be developed. It will remain dirt and trees until the end of time. I looked down at Beatrice. She was staring at the floor, her body shaking. She knew what this meant. Tyler was bankrupt. And since they were married in a community property state without a prenup, she was bankrupt too. You wanted to strip me clean, I said to her. You wanted to leave me with nothing. Now you know how it feels. Tyler lunged. It was a desperate animal act. He threw a punch aimed at my face. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to silence the voice that was destroying him. I didn't need to move. Agent Miller stepped in. He didn't use a gun. He used a simple wrist lock, spinning Tyler around and slamming him face first into the podium. The sound of his nose breaking was a wet crunch that made the guest flinch. You have the right to remain silent, Agent Miller said, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. Though I highly suggest you start talking because the fraud charges we are about to list are going to take all night. I watched as they cuffed him. I watched as they hauled him up, blood streaming from his nose, staining his white shirt. He looked at me with wild eye. I am family, he screamed, spitting blood. You can't do this to family. I leaned in close so only he could hear me. I am not doing this to family, I whispered. I am doing this to a cancer, and I just cut it out. They dragged him away. Beatrice was next. An agent helped her up. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She walked like a zombie, her eyes dead, her spirit broken. She passed me without looking up. She was already gone. I stood alone on the riser. The ballroom was empty of music, empty of joy. The guests began to file out quietly, heads down, afraid to make eye contact with the man who had just turned a party into a crime scene. Henderson walked up to me. He handed me a glass of water. It is done, Isaiah, he said softly. The accounts are locked. The debt transfer is registered. The liens are active. They are finished. I took the water. My hand was steady. Not yet, I said, looking at the empty doorway where my daughter should have been standing. Not yet. There was one more person who had to answer for her sin. I walked down the steps of the rise. The cane clicked against the floor. I have one more stop, I said to Henderson. Where? To see my daughter, I said. She needs to know that she bet on the wrong horse, and she needs to know that the stable is closed. I walked out of the ballroom, leaving the wreckage of my enemies behind me. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt heavy, but I was free. And for a man of 72 who had just survived his own murder, that was enough. The silence in the ballroom was not empty. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that happens after a structural beam snaps and everyone is waiting for the roof lap. Tyler Sterling was still on his knees, the blood from his broken nose dripping onto his pristine white shirt, creating a stark red Rorschach test on his chest. He looked up at me with eyes that were glazed with shock, but behind the shock I could still see the wheel turning the desperate calculations of a gambler trying to figure out how to bluff his way out of room. You are lying, Tyler, spitting a glob of blood. You are lying to scare me. You can't just transfer debt. That is not how it— I have lawyers. I have Arthur Vance. He will tear this document apart. I stepped closer to him, the sound of my shoes on the hardwood echoing like a metronome. I looked down at him, not with anger, but with the clinical detachment of a surgeon looking at a tumor he had just excised. Arthur Vance works for the highest bidder, I said, my voice low and smooth. And do you know what I did yesterday, Tyler, while you were picking out your tie for this party? I sent Arthur a retainer, a very large retainer. He works for the trust now, and he was very helpful in drafting the specific language of the document you signed without reading. I signaled to Henderson again. He tapped a key on his tablet, and the image on the massive screen behind me changed. It was no longer the spreadsheet of debt. It was a complex flowchart, a web of companies and accounts that looked like the schematic for a nuclear reactor. Let me give you a lesson in finance, son, I said, turning to the screen. Since you were so eager to manage my empire, you should understand what you tried to steal. You see, you made a fundamental error in judgment. You assumed that because I am old, cold, I am static. You assumed my wealth was sitting in a checking account just waiting for you to write a check. I pointed my cane at the top box on the chart. It was labeled the Isaiah Thorne Family Legacy Trust. 5 years ago, I realized that the sharks were circling. I didn't know it was you yet, but I smelled the blood in the water, so I moved everything. Every building worth owning, every stock portfolio, the Georgia land, the cash reserve. I moved it all into an irrevocable trust. Do you know what irrevocable means, Tyler? Tyler did not answer. He just stared at the chart, his face turning the color of old ash. It means I cannot change it, I said. It means you cannot change it. It means a judge cannot change it. It is a fortress. It is a vault that locks from the inside. I am not the owner of those assets anymore. I am just the beneficiary. The trustee is a corporate entity based in Delaware that has one instruction: protect the assets from hostile takeover. I looked at Beatrice. She was still on the floor, her expensive dress ruined. She was listening intently, her eyes wide with horror. She understood. She knew what this meant. So when you and Beatrice plotted to declare me incompetent, I continued. You were trying to seize control of a ghost. The Isaiah Thorne you tried to rob owns nothing. He owns the clothes on his back and a checking account with $5,000 in it. The rest belongs to the trust, and the trust does not recognize your power of attorney. It does not recognize your guardianship. It only recognizes the trustee. Tyler shook his head slowly, a low moan escaping his throat. No, that is impossible. I saw the account. I logged in yesterday. I saw the balance. There were millions. I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. You saw what I wanted you to see, I said. You logged into the accounts of Thorne Distressed Assets, LLC. That is the shell company, Tyler. That is the garbage can. That is where I put the buildings that have asbestos lawsuits pending. That is where I put the properties with tax liens from the 90s. That is where I keep the liability. I leaned down, getting into his face. Those accounts showed high balances because they were leverage lines of credit secured by toxic asset. They were not cash asset. They were debt instrument. And when you transferred that $4 million yesterday, you didn't transfer profit. You drew down on a credit line that was already overextended. You essentially took out a loan on a burning building. Tyler looked at Henderson. Henderson nodded grimly, confirming every word. The $4 million you moved to the Caymans, Henderson said, his voice professional and cold, triggered a default clause in the lending agreement. By moving those funds out of the country, you violated federal banking regulations and the terms of the loan. The bank has already frozen the transfer, but the debt remained. I stood up straight, adjusting my cuff. And that brings us back to the document you signed, I said, pointing to the blue folder on the podium, the confession of judgment. By signing that, you didn't just agree to manage the company. You agreed to personally guarantee its obligation. You voluntarily substituted your credit for the company's credit. I let the weight of that sink in. You owe the bank $50 million, Tyler, not the company. You, personal. They will come for your condo. They will come for your car. They will come for your watch. They will garnish your wages for the rest of your life. You will never own a credit card again. You will never sign a lease again. You are not just broke. You are in a hole so deep you will need a telescope to see the sunlight. Beatrice let out a scream. It was a raw, primal sound of a woman watching her future evaporate. You bastard, she shrieked, scrambling to her feet. You can't do this to us. I am your wife. Half of that is mine. This is community property. I looked at her with pity. It was the only emotion I had left for her. You are right, Beatrice, I said. It is community property, which means half of his debt is now your debt. You are married to him, remember? You plotted with him. You signed the papers with him. You are co-guarantors. I gestured to the room. Everything you are wearing, the diamond, the dress, the shoes, it all belongs to the creditors now. You don't have a retirement fund anymore, Beatrice. You have a $50 million bill. Agent Miller stepped forward, clearing his throat. He looked at Tyler with the weary expression of a man who had seen too many greedy men ruin themselves. And then there is the matter of the fraud, Miller said. You see, Mr. Sterling, when you accessed those accounts yesterday, you used Isaiah Thorne's digital credentials. You impersonated him to a federally insured financial institution. You moved money across international lines under false pretense. Miller pulled a folded warrant from his jacket pocket. That is wire fraud. That is bank fraud. And since you did it in conspiracy with others, it is a RICO predicate act. You are looking at 20 years in federal prison. And that is before we even get to the elder abuse charges and the attempted murder of Mr. Bank. Tyler looked at the handcuffs on the agent's belt. He looked at the guests who were now filming him with their phone. He looked at the ruins of his life. He started to cry. It wasn't a dignified cry. It was the sobbing of a child who had been caught stealing from the cookie jar and realized the jar was filled with scorpion. I didn't mean to. He blubbered, snot running down his face, mixing with the blood. I just wanted to secure the future. I wanted to help. Beatrice said it would be easy. She said you were old. She said you wouldn't notice. He pointed a shaking finger at Beatrice. It was her idea. He screamed, desperate to find a lifeboat. She told me about the limp. She told me about the accounts. She hired the actor. I just handled the money. I am a victim here. Beatrice's eyes went wide. She lunged at him. You coward, she yelled. You promised me. You said you were a genius. You said you knew how to hide the asset. They were tearing each other apart. The rats were eating each other on the sinking ship. I watched them with a cold satisfaction. This was the justice I had wanted. I didn't just want them in jail. jail. I wanted them to hate each other. I wanted them to spend the next 20 years in separate cells, knowing that their greed had destroyed the only alliance they had. I turned my back on them. I looked at Henderson. Execute the final phase, I said. Henderson nodded. He typed a command into his tablet. On the screen behind me, the spreadsheet vanished. It was replaced by a single image. It was a live feed from a drone flying over the Georgia countryside. It showed acres of lush green forest, tall pines swaying in the wind, and a small wooden farmhouse that my grandfather had built with his own hands. The crowd watched, mesmerized. The land Tyler promised to sell to Amazon, I said, my voice soft now. Reverent is not for sale. It never was. I turned back to face the room. 5 years ago, I placed that land into a conservation easement. It is a protected wildlife sanctuary. No one can build on it. No one can pave it. No one can turn it into a warehouse. It belongs to the earth now, and it belongs to the history of the people who bled on it. I looked at Tyler, who was now slumped on the floor defeated. You tried to sell a sanctuary, son, I said. You tried to sell my soul for a quick buck, but you forgot one thing. You cannot sell what you do not own, and you never owned me. You never owned this family. You were just a guest, and your invitation has expired. Agent Miller signaled his team. 2 agents moved in and hauled Tyler to his feet. He was limp, dead weight. He didn't fight anymore. He was broken. Another pair of agents went for Beatrice. She tried to pull away, smoothing her dress, trying to regain some shred of dignity. Don't touch me, she hissed. I am Mrs. Isaiah Thorne. I stepped forward. I looked her in the eye. No, I said. You were Mrs. Isaiah Thorne. Now you are just inmate number whatever the state assigns you. And tomorrow I am filing for an annulment based on fraud. You were never my wife, Beatrice. You were just a long con. She looked at me, and for a second I saw the woman I thought I loved. I saw the fear. I saw the regret. But it was too late. The poison was already in the cup. Get them out of here, I said. I watched as they were marched out of the ballroom. I watched the guests part like the Red Sea. I watched the flashbulbs of the cameras capture their shame. When the doors closed behind them, the room was silent again. But it wasn't the heavy silence of before. It was the silence of a storm that had passed. The air felt cleaner. I looked at Henderson. I looked at Darius, who was standing by the exit with Luther. Luther gave me a small salute. He had played his part. He was free. I walked over to the table where Tyler had spilled his scotch. I picked up the glass. I didn't drink from it. I just held it up to the light. The empire was safe. The land was safe. The legacy was safe. But as I looked around the empty room at the faces of the people who had come to celebrate my demise, I felt a deep, profound tiredness. It was over, but the cost was high. I set the glass down. I am ready to go, Henderson said. Where to? He asked. Take me to the lake, I said. I need to wash the smell of this place off me. I walked out of my own house. I didn't look back. I had won the war, but I had lost the peace. And tomorrow I had to start building again. Not buildings, not companies, but a life. A life without vipers. A life that belonged only to me. The sound of steel ratchets clicking into place, echoing off the high vaulted ceilings of my ballroom, was a sound I would carry to my grave, not as a memory of triumph, but as a grim reminder of what it costs to survive your own family. Tyler Sterling was hauled to his feet by 2 federal agents, his pristine white shirt now ruined by the blood streaming from his broken nose and the sweat of a man realizing his life was over. He looked small. Without his arrogance, without his title, without the leverage he thought he held over me, he was just a terrified boy who had played a man's game and lost everything. I watched him struggle against the cuffs, his eyes wild and darting around the room, searching for a friendly face among the crowd of elites he had tried so hard to impress. But there were no friends here, only witnesses. The bankers and developers who had toasted him 10 minutes ago were now looking at him with the detached curiosity of people watching a car wreck. They were already mentally erasing him from their contact list. They were already calculating how to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of his fraud. I did not mean to hurt anyone, Tyler sobbed as they pushed him toward the exit. I just wanted to secure the legacy. I wanted to be a good steward. Steward. Even in handcuffs, he was using corporate speak to sanitize his crime. You were not a steward, son, I said, my voice cutting through his whimpering. You were a parasite. And the host just woke up. They dragged him out. He kicked and screamed his heels, leaving black scuff marks on the hardwood floor marks that I would have to pay to have buffed out. It was his final contribution to my household expense. Then the agents turned to Beatrice. She had stopped screaming. She stood near the riser, her chest heaving, her face a ruin of smeared makeup and terror. She looked at the agents approaching her, and she tried to straighten her spine. She tried to summon the dignity of the lady of the manor. She smoothed her ruined dress. She touched her hair. Do not manhandle me, she hissed at the female agent who reached for her wrist. I am walking. I am walking. She walked, but she did not walk toward the door. She walked toward me. She stopped 3 feet away. The agent held her arm ready to yank her back, but I held up a hand. Let her speak. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the final lie. Isaiah, she said, her voice trembling, dropping into that husky register she used when she wanted me to buy her jewelry or forgive a slight. Isaiah, look at what is happening. This is madness. They are taking me away. I am your wife. I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had shared a bed with for 15 years. I looked at the woman I had taken on vacations to Paris and Tokyo. I looked for the woman I thought I knew. I see you, Beatrice, I said. Then stop this. She pleaded, tears welling up in her eyes, big and luminous. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I was just trying to help you. I did it for us, Isaiah. I did it because I was scared. I was scared of losing you to aid. I was scared of the business failing. I wanted to secure our future. She took a step closer, reaching out with her her free hand, her fingers grasping at the air between us. I love you, she whispered. I have always loved you. Everything I did because I love you. I felt a cold wind blow through my soul. It was the chill of absolute clarity. You do not love me, Beatrice, I said, my voice flat and devoid of pity. You love the lifestyle I provide. You love the credit card with the unlimited limit. You love the way the valet opens the door for you when you pull up in my Mercedes. You love the status of being Miss Isaiah Thorne. I pointed my cane at her chest, right at the diamond necklace that sparkled under the lights. You love my money, I said. That is the only thing you have ever been faithful to. But you made a miscalculation. You thought my money was just a pile of cash waiting to be grabbed. You forgot that money like that doesn't just happen. It is made. It is protected. It is intelligent. I leaned in close so she could see the lack of mercy in my eyes. Too bad my money is smarter than you are, I said. My money knew you were a thief before I did. That is why it was locked away where you couldn't touch it. That is why the trust was irrevocable. My money protected itself from you, Beatrice, because I was too blind to do it myself. Her face crumpled. The mask of the loving wife dissolved, revealing the snarling, desperate creature underneath. You old bastard, she spat, lunging at me before the agent jerked her back. I hope you die alone in this big empty house. I hope you rot. I will die alone, I agreed, but I will die with my name clean, and I will die knowing that the people who wanted to pick my bones are sitting in a cage. Take her away, I said to the agent. She screamed as they cuffed her. It was a raw, ugly sound. She fought them, kicking and biting, abandoning all pretense of elegance. They hauled her out the back, following the path Tyler had taken. Two criminals marching toward a reunion in the back of a federal transport van. The room was silent again. Henderson stood beside me, his face grim. It is over, Isaiah, he said soft. Not yet, I said. I turned toward the side entrance of the ballroom. There was a commotion there, a struggle. Nia burst into the room. My daughter, my flesh and blood. She must have been waiting in the car outside, or perhaps she had come back when she saw the police light. She was breathless, her hair wild, her eyes wide with panic. She saw the empty space where her husband had been. She saw the agents securing the perimeter. She ran toward me. Her heels clicked frantically on the floor. She looked like a child waking up from a nightmare only to find the monster was real. Daddy, she cried, throwing herself at the steps of the rise. Daddy, what did you do? I saw them taking Tyler. I saw them taking Mom. They are in handcuffs. Why are they in handcuffs? I looked down at her. I didn't offer her a hand up. I didn't step down to hug her. I stood on my pedestal, my cane planted firmly between us. They are in handcuffs because they are criminals, Nia, I said. They committed fraud. They attempted murder. And they did it all under my roof. No, she sobbed, grabbing the hem of my pant leg. No, that is not true. Tyler is a good man. He was trying to help. He told me. He said the accounts were a mess. He said he was fixing it. He lied to you, I said. And you believed him because you wanted to believe him. You wanted the easy life, Nia. You wanted the husband who handled everything. You didn't want to ask questions. I didn't know, she pleaded, looking up at me, her face wet with tears. I swear, Daddy, I didn't know about the poison. I didn't know about the fake Isaiah. I just signed the paper because he said it would help you. I am a victim too. He used me. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes, but I also saw the weakness, the moral rot that had allowed her to stand by while her husband dismantled her father's life. You are not a victim, Nia, I said, my voice cracking like a whip. You were in the room. You sat at my table. You watched me drop the glass. You watched them feed me those pills. You heard Tyler talk about putting me away. I paused, letting the memory of our conversation in the study wash over me. I asked you, Nia, I continued. I asked you to your face if you thought I was crazy. I gave you a chance. I begged you to look at me, to see me, and you chose him. You looked me in the eye and you told me I was confused. You told me I needed help. You gaslighted your own father because you were too cowardly to stand up to your husband. I didn't know, she repeated, shaking her head violently. I was scared. You stood and watched them poison me. I roared, my voice echoing off the walls, making the remaining guests flinch. You watched them strip me of my dignity. You signed the paper that was supposed to lock me in a cage until I died. You held the knife, Nia. Just because you closed your eyes while you plunged it in doesn't mean you are innocent. She recoiled as if I had slapped her. She let go of my leg and scrambled back, sitting on the floor in a heap of misery. You are an accomplice, I said, lowering my voice to a cold final judgment. You aided and abetted the destruction of this family. You chose your side, and now that side has lost. Daddy, please, she whispered, reaching out a hand. I have nowhere to go. They seized the house. They froze the accounts. Tyler said, we have nothing. I need you. I need help. I looked at her hand. The hand that had signed the power of attorney. The hand that had waved goodbye to me as the van took me away. You have nothing because your husband gambled it all on my death, I said, and you helped him roll the dice. I turned to Henderson. Give her the card, I said. Henderson stepped forward and pulled a business card from his pocket. He handed it to Nia. She took it with trembling fingers. What is this? She asked. That is the number for a job placement agency, I said. They specialize in entry-level position. Cleaning, food service, honest work. Her jaw dropped. You expect me to work? I have a degree. I am your daughter. You have a degree you never used, I said, and you were my daughter. But the woman sitting on the floor? I don't know her. I turned away from her. I looked at the empty ballroom. Fend for yourself, Nia, I said over my shoulder. Learn what it costs to buy a loaf of bread. Learn what it feels like to pay rent without a trust fund. Learn what it means to survive. Because until you learn that, you are no use to anyone. Daddy, she screamed, scrambling to her feet. You can't do this. You can't leave me. I kept walking. I walked down the steps of the riser. I walked past the agent. I walked past the shattered glass on the floor. I can, I said, not looking back. And I just did. Henderson fell into step beside me. Are you sure, Isaiah? He asked quietly. She is your only child. I stopped at the service door. I looked back one last time. Nia was standing in the center of the room, weeping alone. The guests were gone. The party was over. The lights were humming with a low electric buzz. She is not a child, Henderson, I said. She is a grown woman who made a bet against her father. I pushed the doors open and stepped into the cool night air. And she just lost the house, I said. I walked toward my truck. My leg hurt. The adrenaline was fading and the old pain was coming back. But it was a clean pain. It was the pain of a man who had cut out the rot and cauterized the wound. I was alone. I was tired. But as I climbed into the cab of my old Ford, I realized something. I was safe. For the first time in years, I was safe. And that was worth every tear I wasn't shedding. The fall of Tyler Sterling did not happen in the shadows. It happened under the harsh glare of the public spotlight, exactly where he had always wanted to be. The morning after the party, the Wall Street Journal ran the headline, "The Prodigy Who Bet Against the Godfather." It was a brutal dismantling of his career. His partner, the men he played golf with, the men he thought were his brothers, issued press releases distancing themselves from him faster than rats fleeing a burning ship. They called him a rogue agent. They called him a liability. They erased his name from the firm's website before he had even been processed at the downtown holding cell. I sat in my study drinking coffee, watching the news footage on mute. Tyler was being let out of the federal courthouse for his arraignment. He wasn't wearing his Italian suit and he was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His nose was bandaged, a stark white reminder of the moment his reality collided with Agent Miller's podium. He looked at the cameras, and for a second he tried to summon that old arrogance. He tried to lift his chin, but the weight of the chains around his waist pulled him down. He looked broken. He looked like a man who had woken up in a nightmare he couldn't negotiate his way out of. The charges were a laundry list of white-collar sin: wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy, aggravated identity theft, and the cherry on top, elder abuse. That last one stuck to him like tar. The public hates a thief, but they despise a man who preys on the old. The plea deal they offered him was 20 years. 20 years in a federal penitentiary that was definitely not a country club. Tyler took it. He didn't have a choice. The evidence was overwhelming. The confession of judgment he had signed was ironclad. But the real justice didn't happen in the courtroom. It happened inside. 2 weeks after his sentencing, I received a call from Darius. He sounded amused. "Boss, you are not going to believe who Tyler's cellmate." "Who?" I asked. "A guy named Marcus Little," Darius said. "Big guy. Goes by the name Tiny. He is doing life for racketeering. But here is the kicker. His grandmother lives in the Roosevelt Gardens complex." I smiled. Roosevelt Garden, one of the first affordable housing projects I built in 1985. I had subsidized the rent there for 30 years. I had built the community center where Tiny probably played basketball as a kid. "Does Tiny know who Tyler is?" I asked. "Oh, he knows," Darius chuckled. "Word got around fast. The guards talk, the inmates talk. Everyone knows Tyler is the white boy who tried to declare Isaiah Thorne insane. Everyone knows he is the guy who wanted to tear down Bronzeville to build condos for yuppies. And let's just say Tyler isn't having a good time," Darius said. "He isn't getting beaten up. That would be too easy. No, they are charging him rent." "Rent?" "Yeah. Tiny told Tyler that since he likes real estate so much, he has to pay for the privilege of sleeping on the bottom bunk. Tyler is scrubbing floors. He is doing laundry. He is giving financial advice to drug dealers for a cup of instant noodle. He is the lowest rung on the ladder, Isaiah. And every time he complains, someone reminds him whose name is on the building blocks of the neighborhood he tried to sell." I hung up the phone. It was poetic. The man who wanted to be a king was now a serf, serving the very people he had planned to displace. He was learning the value of a dollar the hard way. He was learning that respect isn't something you buy with a credit card. It is something you earn with blood and loyalty. Then there was Beatrice. Her trial was separate, faster, and much uglier. The video of her poisoning Luther Banks was played on national television. There was no defense against it. There was no way to spin it as a misunderstanding. It was cold-blooded attempted murder. I went to her sentencing. I sat in the back row wearing my dark glasses. I wanted to see her one last time. I wanted to see if there was anything left of the woman I had married. When the bailiffs brought her in, I barely recognized. Without the hair dye, without the professional makeup, without the designer clothes, Beatrice looked ordinary. She looked old. The gray roots were showing. Her skin was sallow under the fluorescent light. Her posture, which had always been so regal, so practiced, was slumped. She looked like a bag of laundry that had been left out in the rain. She scanned the room looking for anyone to save her. Her eyes landed on me. For a moment she straightened up. She touched her hair instinctively. She tried to smile that old manipulative smile, the one that used to work on me when I was tired and lonely. "Isaiah," she mouthed. Help me. I did not move. I did not nod. I just watched. The judge was a woman, a tough, no-nonsense jurist who had seen enough greed to last a lifetime. She looked at Beatrice with open disdain. Mrs. Thorne, the judge said, you preyed on a vulnerable man, you hired a desperate double, and you attempted to kill him to cover your tracks. Your greed is matched only by your cruelty. Beatrice started to cry. It wasn't the pretty crying she used at galas to get donations. It was ugly sobbing, snot and tears. I just wanted security, she wailed. I was afraid of being poor. The judge wasn't moved. You will have plenty of security where you are going, the judge said. I sentence you to 25 years. No parole for 15. The gavel banged. It sounded like a coffin lid slamming shut. Beatrice screamed. She reached out toward me. Isaiah, please, don't let them take me. I am your wife. I stood up. I turned my back on her. I walked out of the courtroom while she screamed my name. I drove to the lakefront. It was a gray, windy day, the kind of Chicago weather that cuts through your coat. I parked my truck and walked to the edge of the water. I thought about Tyler scrubbing floors. I thought about Beatrice rotting in a cell. I thought about the emptiness of my victory. They were gone. The parasites had been removed. The body was clean, but the scars remained. I touched my left leg. The pain was there, dull and familiar. It was a part of me, just like the memory of Beatrice's betrayal would always be a part of me. You don't cut out a tumor without losing some healthy tissue too. My phone buzzed. It was Henderson. The accounts are settled, Isaiah, he said. The debt transfer is finalized. The creditors have seized Tyler's condo, his car, and his investment account. He is wiped out. And the trust is locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Good, I said. And Isaiah? Henderson hesitated. Your daughter called. I looked out at the gray water. The waves were choppy, angry. What did she want? She wanted to know if she could have her mother's jewelry, Henderson said. She said it is family heirloom. She said she needs the money to start over. I laughed. A short, bitter bark of a laugh. Even now, even in the ashes, she was still looking for something to sell. She hadn't learned a thing. She wasn't grieving her mother. She was grieving the diamond necklace. Tell her no, I said. Tell her the jewelry was seized by the creditors to pay for her husband's debt. Tell her it is gone. There was a silence on the line. She is living in a motel, Isaiah Henderson said softly. A cheap one. She is working at a diner. She says it is hard. It is supposed to be hard, I said. Life is hard, Henderson. She is 30 years old. It is time she found out. I hung up. I stood there for a long time watching the water beat against the rock. I was alone. I was 72 years old. I had no wife. I had no children I could call my own, but I had my name, I had my dignity, and I had my land. I walked back to my truck. I didn't limp. I walked with the steady rhythm of a man who has survived the storm. I had one more thing to do. One final act to close the book on Isaiah Thorne, the victim, and open the book on Isaiah Thorne, the survivor. I drove to the old warehouse on 35th Street, the place where I had met Luther, the place where the plan was hatched. I walked inside. It was empty, dusty. I took out the blue folder, the fake power of attorney, the document that had started it all. I took out my lighter. I lit the corner of the folder. I watched the flame curl the paper, turning the legal jargon into black ash. I watched Tyler's signature burn. I watched Beatrice's signature burn. I dropped the burning folder onto the concrete floor. I watched it turn to dust. It was over. I walked out into the sunlight. I was going fishing, real fishing, with a cane pole and a cooler of beer. Just me and the water. No phones, no lawyers, no family, just peace. And God knows I had earned it. The mansion was quiet. It was not the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb, but the clean, crisp silence of a church after the funeral is over and the mourners have gone home. I sat in the high-backed leather chair in my study, the same chair where I had tested my daughter's loyalty and watched her fail. I looked around at the mahogany bookshelves, the Persian rugs, the oil paintings of landscapes I had never visited. For years, these things had been symbols of my success. They were the trophies I had collected to prove to the world that a black man from the South Side could own the castle. But now, looking at them in the cold light of the morning after the arrest, they didn't look like trophies. They looked like stage props. They were the set dressing for a play that had turned into a tragedy. Beatrice had chosen the drapes. Tyler had recommended the art. Every inch of this house was stained with their fingerprint. Every room held a memory of a lie. I stood up and walked to the window. The landscaping crew was outside cutting the grass. They didn't know the master of the house had almost been erased. They just knew the check cleared. I wasn't sad. That was the surprise. I expected to feel the crushing weight of loneliness. I was 72 years old, and I had just sent my wife and son-in-law to prison and disowned my only child. By all societal standards, I should be a broken man weeping into his scot. But I felt light. I felt like I had been carrying a 100-pound sack of concrete on my back for a decade, and someone had finally cut the straps. I picked up the phone on my desk. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It was the number for the United Negro College Fund. "This is Isaiah Thorne," I said when the director answered. "I want to make a donation." "Of course, Mr. Thorne," she said. "How much were you thinking?" "Everything," I said. I explained the terms. I was selling the mansion. I was liquidating the content, the furniture, the art, the jewelry, the cars, everything that wasn't nailed down and everything that was. I estimated the total value at around $15 million. "I want it to go to scholarship," I said. "Full rides, tuition, room board, and book. But not for the kids with the 4.0 GPAs who are already getting offers from Harvard. I want it for the fighters. The kids from the neighborhoods like the one I grew up in. The kids who have dirt under their fingernails and fire in their bellies. The kids who know that if they don't build it, nobody is going to give it to them." The director instructor was weeping by the time I finished. She asked me why. She asked me what I wanted to name the scholarship. Don't name it after me, I said. Name it the Freedom Fund, because that is what it bought me. I hung up. I called a realtor. I told him to list the house. Cash offers only. Quick close. I didn't care about the price. I just wanted to be out by the weekend. Then I packed. It didn't take long. I didn't take the suits. I didn't take the watches. I didn't take the Italian shoes with the hidden compartments. I packed a duffel bag with jeans, flannel shirts, and my old fishing hat. I took the photo of my grandfather standing in front of his farm in Georgia. I took my Bible. I walked out the front door. I didn't lock it. I left the keys under the mat for the realtor. I walked down the long driveway past the fountain, past the manicured hedges. I walked to the curb where my old rusted Ford F-150 was parked. It was the only thing I owned that Tyler and Beatrice had never tried to touch. To them, it was an eyesore. To me, it was a chariot. I threw the bag in the passenger seat. I climbed in. The engine roared to life, a rough, unrefined sound that felt like music. I drove. I didn't drive toward the city. I drove west, away from the skyline, away from the noise, away from the empire. I drove until the skyscrapers turned into strip malls and the strip malls turned into cornfields. I pulled up to a small boat launch on the edge of the Fox River. It wasn't a yacht club. It was a gravel lot with a wooden dock that leaned to the left. Two men were waiting for me. Henderson was sitting on a cooler wearing a fishing vest that looked brand new and a bucket hat that looked ridiculous. Darius was leaning against the railing, smoking a cigar, looking at the water with the watchful eyes of a man who never fully relaxes. They were an odd pair, the white banker who managed millions and the black ex-cop who broke kneecaps. But as I parked the truck and stepped out, I realized something profound. These men had risked their careers for me. They had risked their freedom for me. Henderson could have lost his license for faking the transaction at the bank. Darius could have gone to jail for the raid on the motel. They didn't do it for money. I paid them well, but you don't commit felonies for a paycheck. You do it for loyalty. They were my family, not by blood, but by the iron bond of shared risk and mutual respect. Isaiah, Henderson called out, waving a beer. You are late. The fish are laughing at. I walked down the dock. My left leg hurt a dull ache that reminded me I was alive. I had to take out the trash first, I said, taking the beer he offered. Darius nodded. He didn't smile, but his eyes were warm. You good, boss? I looked at the river. The water was brown and slow-moving. It wasn't the ocean. It wasn't a pristine lake in the Alps. It was just a river in Illinois, and it was beautiful. I am good, Darius, I said. I am better than good. We got into the boat. It was a small aluminum fishing boat, battered and dented. We pushed off. I took the tiller. The motor hummed. We moved out into the current. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. We cast our line. We drank our beer. We watched the sun go down, turning the sky into a bruised purple and gold. I sat there feeling the gentle rock of the boat, and I thought about the word freedom. For 40 years, I thought freedom meant having enough money to tell anyone to go to hell. I thought it meant walls high enough to keep the world out. I thought it meant power. I was wrong. Freedom isn't about what you have. It is about what you don't have. It is about not having to look over your shoulder in your own kitchen. It is about not having to wonder if the person kissing you goodnight is checking your pulse to see if you are dead yet. It is about removing the parasites, the leeches, the people who view your life as a commodity. I had lost a wife. I had lost a daughter. I had lost a fortune in legal fees and liquidated assets. But sitting in that boat with a cheap beer and two men who would take a bullet for me, I felt richer than I had ever felt in the boardroom. I had reclaimed my life. I had burned the infection out, and now I had time. Henderson hooked a catfish. It was a fight. He reeled it in laughing like a kid. Darius netted it. Look at that ugly bastard, Henderson said, holding up the fish. It is beautiful, I said. Darius looked at me. He knew. He knew the cost of the last week. So what now, Isaiah? He asked. What is the plan? The plan? I asked, looking at the horizon. The plan is to catch fish, I said. And then I am going to drive to Georgia. I am going to walk on my grandfather's land. I am going to smell the pine tree, and I am going to build a small house, just big enough for me, no guest room. And then, I am going to live, I said. I am going to live every damn day until the good Lord calls me home, and I am going to do it with my eyes wide open. I cast my line back into the water. The ripples spread out, widening until they disappeared into the flow of the river. It was done. They say blood is thicker than water, but I learned that loyalty is rarer than gold. I built a kingdom to protect my family, but that very protection turned them into predators. My mistake wasn't loving them. It was assuming they loved the man, not the empire. To all the fathers and builders out there, watch who sits at your table when you are starving, and watch who leaves when you are full. Do not fear being alone in your castle. Fear sleeping next to an enemy who knows where you hide the key. Trust actions, never words. And always keep one bank account that only God knows about. Because in the end, the only thing you truly own is your peace of mind, and you have to fight for it every single day. I am Isaiah Thorne. I am 72 years old, and I am finally free. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice and survival. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut someone off to save yourself? Until next time, keep your eyes open and your circle small. What would you do if you discovered that the people you call family were actually parasites waiting for your last breath? Would you close your eyes and let it happen, or would you stand up and protect your legacy like I did? If you found satisfaction in the ending for Tyler and Beatrice, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss the next story of justice justice and the naked truth. Let me know in the comments below. What city are you listening from? And here is a hard question for you. If you were me, would you have forgiven Nia, or did she deserve to be cut out of my life forever?